Continuing our journey with Surah Al-Hajj, the 22nd chapter of the Quran, 78 verses, primarily mentioned a Meccan surah. So we looked at the first few verses, but before we continue, having a rough rendition and reading of these verses, it's important to mention, as we spoke about the fada'il, the virtues of Hajj. And as we know that the day of Arafah is coming upon us, this Tuesday, the day of Arafah, the virtue or the blessings of the day of Arafah, to fast on that day. And fasting on the day of Arafah, 2 years of sins of the individual are forgiven. And likewise to make the dua on the day of Arafah, La ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu, lahul mulku wa lahul hamdu, wa huwa ala kulli shay'in qadir, is the dua of all of the prophets that came before, and likewise the dua given to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And also we find, as we mentioned, that most people or people performing the Hajj will be delivered from the punishment of the hellfire. And ulama fuqaha begin to discuss, is that specifically for those people who are on the plains of Hajj, or does it apply to anybody anywhere on the day of Arafah? And most of them, they conclude, is for anybody at any location. Specifically it speaks about those individuals, but anybody who's making dua on that day, on the day of Arafah. So that is a prize, a treasured day that we shouldn't waste a day, this coming Tuesday, in making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this Hajj, or this global gathering that we mention, as the Quran, it begins by speaking about the gathering of the hereafter. We mentioned the first verse, Ya ayyuhan nasu ittaqu rabbakum inna zalzalata as-sa'ati shay'un 'azim. We mentioned that only 2 surahs inside the Quran begin with Ya ayyuhan nas. What those 2 surahs we mentioned? One is Al-Hajj, the second one is which surah? Surah An-Nisa, the 4th chapter of the Quran, is the only other surah that begins with Ya ayyuhan nas. So a khitab to all of mankind. Remember we mentioned there are certain khitabat, there are certain forms of speech that occur inside the Quran. Whether it be the speech of Ya Ahl al-Kitab, or people of the book, Ya ayyuhal ladina amanu, those who believe, Ya ayyuhan nas. So we find Ya ayyuhan nabi, these are all khitabat, these are all forms of speech that occur inside the Quran. And sometimes those commandments, those words can be specific. They can be specific to only the believers, to Ahlul Kitab, Ya Ahlul Kitab, La taghlu fi dinikum. So it could be only to Ahlul Kitab, oh people of the book, don't be excessive regarding your religious affairs. Ya ayyuhan nabi, harridil mu'minina ala al-qital. O Prophet, inspire the believers towards striving and struggling in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But here we find the khitab is for the whole of mankind. So it's not just addressing specifically the believers or disbelievers, expressing to every single person of humanity of returning back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Fear that day whereby you'll return back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or fear that day whereby there will be the striking of the hour, the earthquake of the hour. We mentioned that the earthquakes, there'll be 3 earthquakes which make 3 of the amongst the 10 of the major signs of the Day of Judgment. Is going to be any khusufat, or sinkings of the earth that will take place. And prior to that, we find amongst the minor signs of the Day of Judgment is kathratul zalazil, is excessive earthquakes will begin to take place, as we find inside Surah Al-Zalzala, or Zilzal, Ida zulzilatil ardu zilzalaha, whereby the earth will begin to shake. And we mentioned that some ulama like Imam Shanqiti goes to the view, it doesn't necessarily mean the physical earthquake that will take place towards the end of time. It's just a concept of the whole ru'ab, the whole fear of the Day of Judgment and what will take place and on that day what will happen. And we spoke about, as the Quran it mentions, describes, gives a descriptive nature about what will take place on that day. As we mentioned, the Quran, as many of the ulama have described or spoken about what is known as taswirul fanni fil Quran, giving a depictory imagery of what the Quran it speaks about, collecting those ayat inside the Quran where it's speaking about al-Jannah, speaking about Jahannam, paradise, hellfire, etc. Or whether it be even al-Ahzab, whereby you find that the enemy, Muslims will meet the enemies, all this depictory that's mentioned inside the Quran. We mentioned that this is all to help the individual to relate to the language of the Quran. As we mentioned last week, there are certain words inside the Quran that we deal with on a daily basis. So it helps us the concept to be able to relate to the Quran. Because if the Quran mentions words, we're going to come inside Surah Hajj, it speaks about the reward inside paradise, the punishment. If it mentions words which are difficult for us to comprehend, then there's no real attachment at times with the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So here Allah mentions يَوْمَ تَرَوْنَهَا تَذْهَلُ كُلُّ مُرْضَعَةٍ أَمَّا أَرْضَعَتْ. The second verse we're looking at, you find on that day, you find يَوْمَ تَرَوْنَهَا تَذْهَلُ تَنْسَى وَتَتْرُكُ. You find that the woman, the breastfeeding woman, will forget, abandon, tansa or tatruk, will leave her child. And this is showing close proximity, that a woman in such a state will not abandon her child. So the Quran doesn't describe that it's a woman just leave a child. It describes a woman in the state. As you said, that murdi'atun, ta murbota, is in a state. In that state of physically breastfeeding a child, she will abandon the child. So this must be something very fearful, or something very, very immense that's taking place, that the woman, the breastfeeding woman, leaves her child. وَتَضَعُ كُلُّ ذَاتِ حَمْلٍ حَمْلَهَا. And the pregnant woman will drop her load. As you find the difference between hamal and himal inside the Quran. Hamal is that which you carry. So the woman carries the load. Himal is what you carry on your back. The burden on your back, meaning the burden of our sins. See how unique the Quran, the Arabic language is. Both of them, ha, mim, lam. One is hamal and one is himal. So it shows the uniqueness of the Quran. But in general, you find that if you understand one word, you're very close to understanding the similar word if it carries a similar construction of the word. That's why you find that the more three-letter verbs or three-letter words that you memorize of the Arabic language, the more you can relate to them. Kataba, darasa, akala, shariba, ja'a, dakhala. The more three-letter verbs that you know, most of the Arabic language is derived from them. So if you understand the verb kataba means he wrote, then automatically understand what katib is, the writer. Maktub, what was written. Maktabun, the office. Maktabatun, the desk. All these different derivatives are all derived from kataba, the same thing. So the more the person understands three-letter verbs, the more a person is able to decipher and understand what the language of the Quran is. وَتَرَى النَّاسَ السُّكَارَى. And you find that people on that day will be sukara. In the Qur'an you find sakra. So there will be a state of drunkenness, but we mentioned they will not be in a state of intoxication. But it's because the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is so severe on that day, it will be as if people are in a drunken or forgotten state. وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يُجَادِلُ فِي اللَّهِ بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ وَيَتَّبِعُ كُلَّ شَيْطَانٍ مَرِيدٍ. The third verse here, we find that there's some people amongst mankind, يُجَادِلُ فِي اللَّهِ بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ. They argue regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without any knowledge. وَيَتَّبِعُ كُلَّ شَيْطَانٍ مَرِيدٍ. And they follow every evil, mischievous shaitan, devil. So here, why is Allah speaking about the day of judgment and then begins to speak about وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يُجَادِلُ فِي اللَّهِ بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ? Because there's people who reject the last day without any knowledge. So straight away after speaking about the last day and giving that depiction of the last day, Allah now speaks about these people who are going to reject the last day, who don't believe in the last day and they don't have any evidences to reject it. Ibn Taymiyyah mentions that the opposite becomes acceptable, that to argue with people with evidences is allowed. So if you argue with someone, وَلَا تُجَادِلُوا أَهْلَ الْكِتَابِ إِلَّا بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ. Don't debate with the people of the book except for with goodness, meaning with evidences. Is a proof that you can argue with people in a good way in presenting evidences to them. But if somebody doesn't want to discuss in a form which is intellectually acceptable, or they just want to be argumentative for the sake of arguing, then the person should just leave that individual. Even amongst us Muslims, we find this growing culture of arguing for the sake of arguing. And that's what we find. And Imam Shafi'i used to say that when you argue with a person, you perceive that you're wrong, وَأَنْ يَكُونَ صَوَابْ عِنْدَهُ قَدْ يَكُونَ صَوَابْ عِنْدَهُ, that person could be holding some element of truth. So that's how a person enters into and here Imam Shafi'i is obviously referring to fuqaha, is referring to Islamic jurists, whereby certain views can be acceptable. And as we find that sometimes even some fuqaha even move their views when they were shown that the view that they're following is incorrect. That's what it means to follow the Quran and the Sunnah. It doesn't mean that you have to make a total 300 degrees, 60 degrees turn on everything that you follow, but there could be certain evidences that show that this, what I follow inside my life, is not the right view, it's inaccurate. Otherwise, you're trying to say that whatever you follow or the person that you follow is infallible, that they don't make mistakes, no matter which imam it is. Whichever imam it is, there's no disrespect to any imam. But what you're trying to highlight is that Imam cannot make mistakes. But you by default saying that the Imam must be right. He can't. You're trying to say he doesn't make a mistake. The only Imam who doesn't make a mistake is the Prophet ﷺ, is the only individual that you make, taqleed al-a'ma, you make a blind following of the Prophet ﷺ. So these individuals, they argue about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, shaitan marid. Marid carries the meaning of kharij and ta'a. Because shaitan doesn't obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, didn't want to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Aba wastakbara wa kana minal kafirin. Aba, he refused and became amongst the arrogant, pride individuals. Kutiba alayhi annahu man tawallahu. Kutiba alayhi. It has been kutiba. We mentioned kataba means to write. Kutiba means written. Fi sigatil majhul, in the absent sense, unknown sense. Kutiba means whom here? Who does it refer to? That's what you find inside the Quran. When the Quran says kutiba alaykumus siyam, kutiba alaykumul qital. Here kutiba, we know who's the one who's prescribed it, written it. Who is it? Who is it? Allah. Kutiba alaykumus siyam. Allah is the one who's saying. Allah didn't say kataballahu la aghlibanna in other places inside the Quran. Allah said kutiba. It's written down. Who's written down? We know here that it's speaking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because Allah is the only one who legislates. So here, kutiba alayhi, who is it being written down upon? Allah has written down which individual? Alayhi annu man tawallahu, written down upon the shaitan. And whoever follows the shaitan, فَأَنَّهُ يُضِلُّهُ وَيَهْدِهِ إِلَىٰ عَذَابِ السَّعِيرِ. Whoever follows shaitan, then shaitan will guide the individual إِلَىٰ عَذَابِ السَّعِيرِ, will guide the individual to the evil torture or the punishment of Sa'ir. Sa'ir is amongst the names of Jahannam. 7 names of Jahannam are mentioned inside the Quran. And likewise, if you look at Surah Ibrahim, Allah describes whereby you find what is known as the khutbah of shaitan. How can that be? How can it be khutbah of shaitan? That's what ulama of Tafsir say. This is the sermon of shaitan, whereby he's going to stand on the day of judgment and he's going to absolve himself and say, فَلَا تَلُومُونِي وَلُومُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ. Don't blame me, blame your own self. He's going to dissolve himself. What did I do? أَوْلِي دَعُوتُكُمْ فَاسْتَجَبْتُمْ لِي. I only called you and you responded to me. That's we find inside the Quran, the end of the Quran, الَّذِي يُوَسْوِسُ فِي صُدُورِ النَّاسِ. The one who whispers in the heart and the mind of mankind, and then he just helter-skelter runs away. Whisper something and then we follow that whisper. We're responsible for our own self. So he knows what the end is going to be, but he's trying his best to take as many people as he can towards the punishment. Then Allah mentioned, Ya ayyuhan nasu in kuntum fi raybin min al-ba'thi. Then Allah makes this khitab speech again. Ya ayyuhan nas, O mankind, if you are in doubt regarding al-ba'th, rayb bima'na shak. If you have any doubt regarding the resurrection. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has already spoken about the last day. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala codifies it that if you don't believe in the last day, you don't believe in al-ba'th, wan-nushur, the resurrection. That's we find many of the evidences inside the Quran speak about resurrection. To show many examples inside the Quran how Allah gives life to the dead earth, to the dead plantation. Why all these parables inside the Quran? To show this, if you can visualize these things, then this is what's going to happen. It's easy for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to do that with the creation inside the hereafter. Also, ulama mentioned that if you think the last day is far away, then contemplate and reflect upon your own creation. So maybe you might think that the last day is far away, and these are things that we can't imagine, it's beyond our comprehension. Allah then gives this khitab, Ya ayyuhan nas. Allah doesn't say, O believers, Allah says, O mankind. In kuntum fi raybin min al-ba'thi. If you're in doubt regarding the resurrection, فَإِنَّا خَلَقْنَاكُم مِّن تُرَابٍ. So now Allah's giving this example now, that we created you from turab, from the earth. We know that Adam alayhi salam, the original human being, was created from mud, from clay. ثُمَّ مِن نُطْفَةٍ. Then we find that the next stage of human being is created from semen. ثُمَّ مِن عَلَقَةٍ. Then we find from alaqa, from the clot of blood, red blood put together. ثُمَّ مِن مُدْغَةٍ مُخَلَّقَةٍ. Then we make it like a chewed lump of flesh, which is complete, وَغَيْرْ مُخَلَّقَةٍ, and that which is incomplete. That's why ulama begin to discuss that as the child grows inside the fetus of the mother, that sometimes it becomes complete, sometimes it doesn't become complete. لِنُبَيِّنَ لَكُمْ وَتُقِرُّ فِي الْأَرْحَامِ. To show you Yani the qudra of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as it resides inside the fetus or the womb of the mother. مَا نَشَاءُ إِلَىٰ أَجَلٍ مُسَمَّى, as long as we will, to an appointed time. That you find inside the hadith that the narrator mentions وَهُوَ الصَّادِقُ الْمَصْدُوقُ, that he is the truthworthy, the trustworthy one, the Prophet ﷺ, how he described how the creation of the human being is. That he is for 40 days in a certain state, then for another 40 days, then another 40 days, and 120 days, you find that life or the soul is blown into the fetus. And then 4 things are written about the individual at that moment in time. And that's when ulama begin to discuss that after that moment in time, any form of abortion is not allowed unless it's something really, really detrimental or harmful to the woman, to the mother. And as a side point, even abortion is even illegal inside this country. It's just that it's become now common inside in other countries that it's illegal to carry out any form of abortion unless there's a justified reason. And obviously that's something which Islam has spoken about as well. Anyhow, returning back to the topic that Allah إِلَىٰ أَجَلٍ مُسَمَّى ثُمَّ نُخْرِجُكُمْ طِفْلًا. Then after this reproduction cycle or the creation of the human being, ثُمَّ نُخْرِجُكُمْ طِفْلًا, we bring you out as a child. ثُمَّ لِتَبْلُغُوا أَشُدَّكُمْ, then we bring you to the limit of your strength, your quwwah. وَمِنْكُمْ مَنْ يُتَوَفَّى وَمِنْكُمْ مَنْ يُرَدُّ إِلَىٰ أَرْضِ الْعُمُرِ. There's those of you who die before they reach the prime age, and there's those of you who come to إِلَىٰ أَرْضِ الْعُمُرِ, who come to the feeble, weakest moment of their life, meaning you return back in a state of need. لِكَيْ لَا يَعْلَمَ مِنْ بَعْدِ عِلْمٍ شَيْئًا, that you don't know nothing regarding what you knew before. And that's what you find inside Surah Rum. Allah describes about that Allah has created a human being fi ضعف, then in state of quwwah, then state of ضعف, then returns back to a state of weakness. So as a child you're weak, then you become strong. Then if you make it beyond a certain age, you become in a state of a weakness and a state of need. And Allah numerous places inside the Quran mention that we gave you the faculties of hearing and seeing, that you was nothing before. وَجَعْلَكُمُ السَّمْعَ وَالْأَبْصَارَ وَالْأَفْئِدَةَ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَشْكُرُونَ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that created us and gave us the faculties of hearing and seeing and understanding. لَعَلَّكُمْ تَشْكُرُونَ. هُوَ الَّذِي أَخْرَجَكُم مِّن بُطُونِ أُمَّهَاتِكُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ شَيْئًا. Allah brought you out of the wombs of your mothers. لَا تَعْلَمُونَ شَيْئًا. You did not have any knowledge, any understanding. All these isharat inside the Quran, if you reflect upon them, Allah describes that He created you from مِّن مَّاءٍ مَّهِينٍ, from despicable water, from nutfa, from etc. weakness. Why does Allah use such words? Because man thinks he's what? He's powerful. He becomes arrogant. He becomes proud. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to show what's the essence of you as a human being. And you try to become mutakabbir, become arrogant in front of us. وَتَرَى الْأَرْضَ هَامِدَةً. Then Allah gives this description, going back to the Day of Judgment, to describe, you find that the earth هَامِدَةً مَيْتَةً. You see the earth, it is dead. فَإِذَا أَنزَلْنَا عَلَيْهَا الْمَاءَ. If we send down the rain upon it, اهتزت تحركت. The earth begins to move. وَرَبَتْ وَأَنبَتَتْ. It begins to plump, it begins to increase. وَأَنبَتَتْ. And it sprouts out, brings out min kulli zawjin bahij. And every type of beautiful plantation of vegetation is visualized. This inside the Quran is common, that Allah speaks about the rain coming down, the barren land, and bringing out the vegetation. Inside Surah Al-Hadid, Allah gives this description again about describing about the vegetation. أعجب الكفار, that it marvels the kuffar. Now here, most of us, when we read the word kuffar, what does kuffar mean inside our mind? What does it mean? Disbelievers. But that's not what the meaning here is, disbelievers. Because أعجب الكفار, because how can the disbelievers see the rain, see the vegetation, and it marvels them? Then they begin to recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Doesn't make sense. Because then Allah wouldn't call them kuffar then. If they recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, why is Allah saying أعجب الكفار نباته ثم يهيجه? Why is Allah saying kuffar? Because kuffar here is the linguistic meaning. Because kafara means juhudun ni'mah. person who rejects the blessings of Allah. But here, the literal meaning of here is kafir, is fallah, is the farmer. Because the kafir yughatti al-haq. The kafir conceals the truth. And the farmer conceals what? The seed. See the context? The farmer conceals the seed underneath the ground. So when the rain comes and the fruits or the vegetation begin to sprout out, a'jab al-kuffar. Who marvels? Who gets happy? The farmer. So that's why it shows the importance of understanding the Quran. First you find lughatan. To linguistics we find that a person, a mufassir, can't be a mufassir of the Quran if they don't know the Arabic language. Amongst the shurut, the conditions of being able to make tafsir of the Quran and to understand the Quran is knowing Arabic language. So the person doesn't know Arabic language and they're trying to understand or decipher the Quran, they've broken the rules already because they're going to deviate. Because you find that the linguistics have a great impact upon the Shar'i meaning, the linguistic meaning and the technical meaning. Many times there tends to be a bond between them. Like as-salah, the salah that we read, that we codify, inside the Quran, it doesn't mean that always, the salah that we read. It carries the meaning of what? What does it mean? Ad-du'a, supplication. It means supplication. So, but the link is there that the salah that we read is all what? Is all supplication, all du'a. So a person needs to understand the linguistics or the linguistic meaning of the Quran and studying the Arabic language to understand what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying to us. That doesn't mean we have to have a deep understanding of Arabic language. Obviously you want to go deep into tafsir, then obviously you need to. But if you're just a general reading the Quran, we should all be familiar, be able to read the Quran and have a general understanding of the Quran. That's why read as much of the Quran as you can and read the translation. So many things are easy inside the Quran. Surah Yusuf, Surah Ibrahim, Surah Yunus. Read these surahs, read the translation. So next time the Imam is reading, you're able to do what? You're able to follow. If you read the tafsir, then obviously it gives you that imagery inside your mind. You read the story of Yusuf, you can depict what's taking place, what's happening there inside your mind. That's why they say that even people who speak about linguistics, that reading is a powerful tool. Because the ability to read gives you a deeper understanding of words. It's powerful reading. Just unlike today, we find to visualize things. So reading has an impact upon the individual. And to read, as we mentioned, in the Quran excessively, there's so many benefits inside there, and fawaid and benefits. Then Ibn Kathir begins to speak about how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as we mentioned, this hadith is ghareeb jiddan, as he mentions, but he highlights that various privileges which are given, speaking about returning back to the old age, in the age of need. He mentions this narration that when a person gets to the age of 40, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protects him from three things: al-junoon, wal-judham, wal-baras, any form of madness and viruses and diseases. إِذَا بَلَغَ 50, he comes to the age of 50, خَفَّفَ اللَّهُ عَنْهُ حِسَابُهُ, Allah makes it easy regarding his accountability. إِذَا بَلَغَ 60, if he comes to the age of 60, رَزَقَ اللَّهُ al-inaba, Allah grants him the ability to make tawbah to him. If he comes to 70, the people of the heavens, they love him. Comes to 80, then you find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala writes down good deeds of the individual and wipes out their bad deeds. If he comes to 90, the age of 90, غَفْرَ اللَّهُ مَا تَقَدَّمَ مِنْ ذَنْبِهِ, Allah forgives that person's sins. And a person goes beyond that and they lose their senses and become senile, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala writes down everything they used to do in the past. Even though this hadith is ghareeb jiddan, but we can see that it shows that the more a person gets elderly inside their age, the more closer they should be coming to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and thanking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the end part, this narration is important because here it mentions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when they lose their senses, will write down everything they normally used to do. And there's authenticity towards that, in the sense that we know inside the hadith that when a person falls sick or ill, or the person's traveling, or a person forgets, everything you normally used to do, that will be written down for you. It will be written down for you. So if you're normally reading extra sunan, extra nawafil, doing extra good deeds, then when you fall ill, or you're traveling, or you lose your senses, etc., that same amount of action is being written down for you. And this shows the importance that where many of us, we fall into technical studies. Technical studies are good, but don't try to apply them. Because then when a person begins to weaken inside the sunnah, weaken inside the nawafil. Yes, sunnah means that you'll be rewarded if you do it, and you won't be sinful if you don't do it. That's the technical meaning. That doesn't mean avoid it. See the difference? Because that's what's become common in our society, that it's only sunnah. Yes, we know it's only sunnah. That's a technical issue. But it doesn't mean, because what happens now, you can understand why fuqaha begin to speak about reading certain nawafil, certain sunan throughout the day. Because when a person falls ill or they become sick, if they're used to praying certain actions, they will abandon that on that day. But if you only pray the faridah, only pray the obligatory salah, for example, you don't pray no sunnah, no nawafil, nothing else. The day you're not feeling well, you're feeling sick, or you're rushed to do something, what are you going to do with just the bare obligation? You're going to skip through that. You're going to hasten through it. It's not going to be a strong fard action. Which is, we can see that it's quite visible. Whereas you find that if a person has these extra sunnah nawafil, if you're traveling, you're doing something, you leave the nafil, you leave the sunnah. Your fard is still intact because you're focusing upon it. But if the only thing you do is the fard, then time will come that will be weakened and will not be focused towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then we come to verse number 6. ذَلِكَ بِأَنَّ اللَّهُ وَالْحَقِّ وَأَنَّهُ يُحْيِي الْمَوْتَ وَأَنَّهُ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. So Allah then describes ذَلِكَ بِأَنَّ اللَّهُ هُوَ الْحَقِّ, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the truth, and shows that He is أَنَّهُ يُحْيِي الْمَوْتَ, that He's going to give life to the dead. Just remember, the whole theme is speaking about what? The Day of Judgment. That those individuals who reject the Day of Judgment, who reject the concept of resurrection. As Allah mentions another place in the Quran, زَعَمَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا أَلَّنْ يُبْعَثُوا. The disbelievers make this claim that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's going to be no resurrection. There's going to be no Day of Judgment. قُلْ بَلَا وَرَبِّي لَتُبْعَثُنَّ ثُمَّ لَتُنَبَّؤُنَّ بِمَا عَمِلْتُمْ وَذَلِكَ عَلَى اللَّهِ يَسِيرٌ. And say, nay, by your Lord, indeed your Lord will bring you back to life once again. And that is something what? وَذَلِكَ عَلَى اللَّهِ يَسِيرٌ. That is something simple and easy for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you look at the end of Surah Yasin, the 36th chapter of the Quran, وَضَرَبَ لَنَا مَثَلًا وَنَسِيَ خَلْقَهُ. The human being gives this example about himself. And remember, in the context, we're speaking about how the human being was created inside the end of Surah Yasin. قَالَ مَنْ يُحْيِي الْعِظَامَ وَهِيَ رَمِيمٌ. He says, who's going to give life to these bones when they're rotten away? They become dust. They've crumbled away. قُلْ يُحْيِيهَا الَّذِي أَنْشَأَهَا أَوَّلَ مَرَّةٍ. Say, the one who gave them life in the beginning is going to give them life again. وَهُوَ بِكُلِّ خَلْقٍ عَلِيمٌ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all knowledgeable over all creation. Allah, الَّذِي جَعْلَكُمْ مِنَ الشَّجَرِ الْأَخْضَرِ نَارًا, is the one who brings from the green tree, brings about fire. That you rub the branches together, and it ignites the fire. فَإِذَا أَنْتُم مِّنْهُ تُوقِدُونَ, and you begin to seek benefit from the fire. So that's the end of Surah Yasin, speaking about the creation of the human being, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bring it back once again. وَأَنَّ السَّاعَةَ آتِيَةٌ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهَا. Again, the concept of the hour. That the hour, لَا رَيْبَ فِيهَا. There is no doubt regarding the last day. As-sa'a literally means the hour. But here, as-sa'a is one of the names of the Day of Judgment. Some 25 odd names of the Day of Judgment are mentioned inside the Quran, and derivatives and description of adverbs, whatever, describing their judgment are many inside the Quran. As Imam Qurtubi, in his famous collection of speaking about the last day, collects up to maybe some 80 different derivatives or descriptions about the last day. وَأَنَّ السَّاعَةَ آتِيَةٌ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهَا. Just like inside the beginning of Surah An-Nahl, Allah mentioned, أَتَى أَمْرُ اللَّهِ فَلَا تَسْتَعْجِلُوهُ. أَتَى أَمْرُ اللَّهِ. Indeed, the commandment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has come. Ata is what? Fi'l madi, the past tense. Allah is describing the last day in the past tense. Why is Allah mentioning it in the past tense? It hasn't come. So why does Allah speak about it in the past tense? Because ata carries, the past tense carries a meaning in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that has been written down, meaning hatman laziman, is definitely going to happen, as if it has happened. It has already happened with Allah. The last day has been established, written down with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah describes it in the last tense. We can't speak about the last day in the past tense. We haven't faced it. No one's faced it, but Allah describes it inside the last tense, and to show the authenticity regarding it. لا ريب فيها وأن الله يبعث من في القبور. There's no doubt about the last day, and indeed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will resurrect whatever is inside the graves, that Allah will bring them about. Now here we find that people, these intellectual people, say about the qubur, the graves, how will people come out the graves, how's there going to be punishment inside the grave, a person who's passed away, who was eaten by a wild animal, who got burnt alive, who drowned, who died in the skies. So why does Allah mention qubur? Why does Allah mention the graves? Because most people who die will be buried in a grave. So most people will be buried in a grave. As for wherever anybody else dies, those 5 people who died inside the ocean at the moment that we find, their grave is where? In the ocean. So their qubur, their qabr becomes in the grave. Because qabr is what's known as hayatul barzakhiyah, the life of the interspace. So wherever you are, it becomes your grave, wherever you happen to be. But most people, because they are placed inside a physical grave, a hole is dug in the ground and replaced it. So Allah describes the common format of how most people will pass away, that becomes their grave. As we mentioned many times, the punishment of the grave and trying to decipher that and to see that, this is the knowledge of the unseen. Just like we find a person can go to sleep, fall asleep, and a person could be sleeping next to them, or a person in the same room. Both people could be asleep, and one could enter into a different world, in a different zone, could see nightmares, see whatever it may be, and another person is sleeping comfortably, and you can't tell what's taking place. Only that person, when they awaken, they're able to describe, this is what I saw inside my sleep. So that is what the grave is. That once you enter in that space, no one can describe it or imagine it. وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يُجَادِلُ فِي اللَّيْهِ بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ وَلَا هُدًى وَلَا كِتَابٍ مُنِيرٍ. First time we find people who are arguing about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without any knowledge. Now we find that people are arguing without knowledge, but these are people who claim to be intellectuals. So who are rejecting the last day, rejecting resurrection, rejecting the punishment of Allah, rejecting standing in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala بِالرَّأِي وَالْهَوَى, with their opinions and their desires. And some ulama even go that this goes to speak about people of innovation and misguidance, that they have no knowledge of what they're doing inside their lives, and they try to misguide other individuals. ثانية عطفه ليضل عن سبيل الله. ثانية عطفه carries the meaning of the person لاويا عنقه تكبرا, that a person is raising their neck in a state of arrogance. And this is described many times inside the Quran, that the arrogant individuals is either via their speech, مستكبرا عن الحق, they reject the truth, or you find physically they show that. وَلَا تُصَعِّرْ خَدَّكَ لِلنَّاسِ. Luqman alayhi salam, when he gives advice to his son inside the 31st chapter of the Quran called Surah Luqman, he gives this long list of advices to his son. In that he says, وَلَا تُصَعِّرْ خَدَّكَ لِلنَّاسِ. Sa'ar bisad carries the meaning about a disease that enters into the camel's neck. And so the camel has to raise its neck. It's not able to move its neck. So as you find the camel, it raises its neck, you think it's arrogant in that sense. But it could be a disease that enters there. So Allah is describing, Luqman is saying to his son, وَلَا تُصَعِرْ خَدَّكَ. Don't raise your neck and look away from people, despising people. Because we find arrogance, whoever has مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّ مِنَ الْكِبْرِ لَا يَدْخُلُ الْجَنَّةِ. Whoever has an atom's weight of pride will not go to Jannah. So the companions, or in that circle, they asked the Prophet ﷺ, but one of us likes to dress well. He likes his clothing to be good. He likes his shoes to be good. And the Prophet ﷺ said, no, that's not arrogance. Sometimes it can lead to arrogance, but that's not the real arrogance. He said the real arrogance is hadith inside Sahih Muslim, al-kibr, batrul haq, wa ghamtun nas. Kibr, arrogance, is to reject the truth, wa ghamtun nas, and to despise people, to look down upon people. That's what kibr, arrogance is. So we could, may Allah forbid, share any of these elements, that we can reject the truth that is given to us, or we could be people, ghamtun nas, we despise, we look down, that we may have the truth, we look down upon other individuals, is also an element of al-kibr. So this is all kinaya, this is all language that you find kinaya anil al-kibriya, staying away from any form of arrogance. ثانية عطفه ليضل, I feel under the qira'ah ليضل, whether it be with dhamma or fatha, both are acceptable. ليضل بمعنى هو لا يضل, he's the one who misguides the person. في الدنيا له في الدنيا خزي, inside his dunya hawanun wa halak, this person will be in a despicable state inside his dunya. وَنُذِيقُ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ عَذَابَ الْحَرِيقِ, and a day of judgment will make that individual taste the evil chastisement on that day. وَإِذَا تُتْلَ عَلَيْهِ آيَاتُنَا وَلَّا مُسْتَكْبِرًا. Another place inside the Quran, Allah mentioned signs are recited upon this individual. وَلَّا مُسْتَكْبِرًا. They walk away in a state of arrogance. ذَلِكَ بِمَا قَدَّمَتْ يَدَاكَ وَأَنَّ اللَّهَ لَيْسَ بِظَلَّامٍ لِلْعَبِيدِ. This is because what their own hands have earned. Many times inside the Quran, Allah describes that what you earn with your own hands. In a place in the Quran, Allah mentions ذُقْ إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ الْعَزِيزُ الْكَرِيمُ. ذُقْ, ذوق means to taste. Look at the language of the Quran. Allah is not saying ذُقْ, taste, in the imperative form, fi'l amr. But what's there to taste? Because taste is to be towards something which is good. But here Allah is describing that you try to taste the things inside the dunya and rejoice inside this dunya. ذُقْ إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ الْعَزِيزُ الْكَرِيمُ. That you thought you was mighty and noble inside this dunya. So now you taste the punishment of the hellfire. وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يَعْبُدُ اللَّهَ عَلَى حَرْفٍ. Verse number 11. There's some people who worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ala harf, بمعنى الشك أو على الجانب. They worship Allah either with doubt upon doubt or on the sideline, on the brink. And then Allah then describes what it means. فَإِنْ أَصَابَهُ خَيْرٌ اطْمَأَنَّ بِهِ. If some good comes to him, he's at peace. وَإِنْ أَصَابَتْهُ فِتْنَةٌ انْقَلَبَ عَلَى وَجْهِهِ خَسِرَ الدُّنْيَا وَالْآخِرَةَ ذَلِكَ وَالْخُسْرَانُ الْمُبِينُ. And if some calamity, ibtila, Allah tests the individual, then you find he falls flat on his face. خَسِرَ الدُّنْيَا وَالْآخِرَةَ ذَلِكَ هُوَ الْخُسْرَانُ الْمُبِينُ. Now, ulama for Tafsir begin to discuss that what does it mean? وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يَعْبُدُ اللَّهَ عَلَى حَرْفٍ. In a hadith inside Bukhari that we find that when the people, when they came to Medina, they said that if a wife gives birth to a ghulam, to a son, to a boy, we find that our animals, they give birth to a flock of animals, etc., then that means that this is deen salih. This means it's a righteous deen, Islam is. And if it's the opposite, then this deen is not true. You look at the examples that Allah gives. It's as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is speaking to us. In other words, He's trying to say that when there's good things, then we all worship Allah. But when some calamity comes or some test comes, then that's when we begin to waver. And that's not what Iman is. No one should think that Iman, Islam is that everything is going to go 100% my way. My life is going to be free from calamities, free from obstacles, free from hardship. That's not what life is. There's going to be certain tests that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can see whether we really do believe in Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we shouldn't be people like وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يَعْبُدُ اللَّهَ عَلَى حَرْفٍ. We worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the edge. When things are going good, then alhamdulillah, I'm happy. When there's some hardship, some calamities, then my iman begins to waver. Then me coming to the masjid, reading the Quran, doing good deeds, then this thought, because obviously we're surrounded with this world, because that's what people say, always complaining, oh, if God was so good, so generous, so kind, why are people suffering for in the world? These type of questions, they're false in the beginning. Person shouldn't entertain these questions. That's why Christians have this question that, oh, if God is so all-powerful and strong, then can God create a rock which He can't even lift Himself? So you can't answer that. But it's just trying to create doubt in a person's mind. That's why this type of logic is false from the beginning. We don't entertain this type of questioning and this type of mindset. That's why we don't ask questions about Allah. That's why even it's mentioned that when people come and ask questions, that's why it's in the hadith it mentioned that Shaitan would say, a person would come and say, who created this, who created that, who created that? And we ask, who created Allah? You don't entertain that question. You look at the creation of Allah and reflect upon that. You don't question about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as we mentioned last week about the person who questions Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. يَدْعُو مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ مَا لَا يَضُرُّهُ وَمَا لَا يَنْفَعُهُ ذَلِكَ وَالضَّلَالُ الْبَعِيدُ. So a person calls upon that which doesn't benefit them, whether it be the idols, the statues, or whatever they think that will help them. Whatever they call upon doesn't benefit them. وَلَا يَنْفَعُهُ, cannot harm them or benefit them in any way. ذَلِكَ وَالضَّلَالُ الْبَعِيدُ. And this is going far away, astray. Also we've got quite a few ayats, we'll have to rush through this in a certain sense. يَدْعُو لَمَنْ دَرُّهُ أَقْرَبُ مِنْ نَفْعِهِ. He calls upon that which harms him. يَدْعُو لَمَنْ دَرُّهُ أَقْرَبُ مِنْ نَفْعِهِ. That which is closer to harming him than actually benefiting him. لَبِئْسَ الْمَوْلَى. What a bad protector that a person is calling upon. وَلَبِئْسَ الْعَشِيرُ. What a bad, wretched ashir, بمعنى الصاحب, companion this is, meaning turning to others besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Inna Allah yudkhilu alladhina amanu wa amilu salihat. Indeed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enters those who believe. So after mentioning those individuals who disbelieve in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and how they're disgraced, Allah then mentions that indeed those individuals, alladhina amanu wa amilu salihat, which is throughout the Quran. You can't just have belief. Allah always couples belief with what? Wa amilu salihat. For these individuals will be jannatin tajri min tahti al-anhar. Inna Allah yaf'alu ma yurid. Allah does whatever befits His Majesty, will punish those individuals for their disobedience and what they attribute to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and grants these individuals the reward will be given to these individuals. Man kana yadhunnu alla yansurahu Allah fi dunya al-akhirah. Whoever thinks that we will not support him, yansuruhu is referring to who? To the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, as ulama at Tafsir have mentioned, that we will not give him victory inside this world, inside the akhirah. Inna لننصر رسلنا والذين آمنوا في الحياة الدنيا ويوم يقوم الأشهاد. Another place in the Quran, we indeed will give victory to our messenger and those who believe inside this world, and the day of testimony witnessing is given. That's why Ibn Taymiyyah speaks about the difference between a Rasul and a Nabi. Amongst the various differences that exist between a Rasul and a Nabi, a Rasul is always going to be victorious. If a messenger goes to war, he's victorious. كتب الله لأغلبن أنا وَرُسُلِي. Allah has written down that Allah and then His Messenger will always be victorious. Is that the distinction? The Rasul is one who's been given a Sharia, has been given a new book, has been given to him. That's why we find that every Rasul, kullu Rasul huwa Nabi. Every messenger by default is a Nabi. وَلَيْسَ كُلُّ نَبِي رَسُولًا. But not every prophet is a messenger. And some messengers are both a prophet and a messenger, like Musa alayhi salam, like our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that we find is both a prophet and a messenger. And the word Nabi goes back to the word Naba'a, to give news, to give information. So the Nabi is giving information regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَكَذَلِكَ أَنزَلْنَهُ آيَاتٍ بَيِّنَاتٍ. Likewise we've sent down, أَنزَلْنَاهُ, sent down it, bayinat, referring to either the Quran or the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَأَنَّ اللَّهَ يَهْدِي مَنْ يُرِيدُ. And indeed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides whomever He wants. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَالَّذِينَ هَادُوا وَالصَّابِئِينَ وَالنَّصَارَى وَالْمَجُوسَ وَالَّذِينَ أَشْرَكُوا. Allah mentions 6 categories of belief here. 6 categories of belief. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, those who believe are the Muslims. وَالَّذِينَ هَادُوا, are the Jews. وَالصَّابِئُونَ, the Sabians are those individuals who came before the Jews and the Christians. Long discussion inside Surah Al-Baqarah takes place regarding them. Some people said they were believing individuals and they existed before the Jews and the Christians. One Nasara, then the Christians. Wal Majus, the Magians are those individuals who believe a God of good and a God of evil. Walladina ashraku, and those who are mushriks. So as if all of the adyan, all the religions are discussed, because in reality all other religions all stem from these 6 main elements of belief that we find. And Allah mentions, Inna Allah yafsilu baynahum yawm al-qiyamah. Allah will make a distinction between all these faiths or these ways of life, whatever it may be, religions, on their judgment. Inna Allah ala kulli shay'in shaheed. And Allah is a witness over all things, meaning that Islam, that those who believe and Islam is the only way, which is Inna ad-deena indallahi al-Islam. The only way of life in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-Islam. So once again, when the Quran speaks or praises about certain Christians or Jews inside the Quran, that is specific. That's specific for those people at that time. You can't pluck that verse and say, right, Quran is praising all Christians and Jews, so they're going to paradise, according to Quran. It shows a lack of understanding of the Quran. That even when the Quran does speak about them, it could be specific to them. All those ayat could be mansukha, they could be abrogated, they could be nullified. The qira'ah exists, the reading exists, but the hukm has been lifted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That shows the importance of understanding the tafsir of the Quran, of the language of the Quran. Alam tara anna Allah yasjudu lahu man fis samawati wa man fil ard. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala highlights is the first sajda that comes here. We mentioned 2 sajdas, as Ibn Abbas mentioned, 2 sajdas occur inside Surah Al-Hajj. This is the first sajda where there's no difference of opinion regarding it. The second sajda we mentioned is a difference of opinion in the end of the surah. Don't you see that whatever is in the heavens and the earth, وَالشَّمْسُ وَالْقَمَرُ وَالنُّجُومُ. And some ulama mention, why does Allah mention وَالشَّمْسُ وَالْقَمَرُ وَالنُّجُومُ? Why the sun, the moon and the stars? Because the people who worship the sun, the moon and the stars. Don't you see that what you worship actually worships who? It worships Allah. It submits to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why you find the discussion inside Surah Al-An'am of Ibrahim alayhi salam speaking about when he saw the stars, when he saw the moon, when he saw the sun, teaching his people. And obviously the concept they say that Ibrahim alayhi salam was searching for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is false. He knew Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. His teaching is a form of da'wah. He's giving to his people that this can't be Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The stars, they go away. The moon, it goes away. The sun, it rises and it goes away. There's something greater than this who created all this that we need to submit to, and that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَالْجِبَالُ وَالشَّجَرُ وَالدَّوَابُ. You find that the mountains, وَالشَّجَرُ, the trees, وَالدَّوَابُ, whatever living creatures it may be, the beasts upon this earth, وَكَثِيرٌ مِنَ النَّاسِ, and the majority of mankind, وَكَثِيرٌ حَقَّ عَلَيْهِ الْعَذَابُ. And there's many people who won't submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَمَنْ يُهِنِ اللَّهُ فَمَا لَهُ مِنْ مُكْرِمٍ. Whoever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala disgraces, there's going to be no respect to that individual. إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَفْعَلُ مَا يَشَاءُ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does whatever He wants to do. Another place in the Quran, لَا تَسْجُدُوا لِلشَّمْسِ وَلَا لِلْقَمَرِ وَاسْجُدُوا لِلَّهِ الَّذِي خَلَقَهُنَّ. Don't prostrate to the sun and the moon. Prostrate only to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As we find awqatun nahi, certain times we're prohibited from offering the salah whilst the sun is rising and whilst the sun is setting, because that's the time that you find that the time that people worship shaitan, or it rises between the two horns of shaitan. So those times are forbidden times of prayer, the rising of the sun and the setting of the sun. The moment time person doesn't offer their prayer at that time. And there's people who are, as we mentioned, who are worshipping the sun and the moon even to this day that we find. And we find that Ibn Kathir mentions that إِذَا قَرَأ Ibn Adam السَّجْدَ اعْتَزَلَ الشَّيْطَانِ يَبْكِي. So we find that when in the hadith inside Sahih Muslim, that when the son of Adam reads the verse which contains sajda, shaitan, he runs, flees, yabki. He weeps, he cries, وَيَقُولُ يَا وَيْلَتَا أُمِرَ Ibn Adam بِالسُّجُودِ فَسَجَدَ فَلَهُ الْجَنَّةِ. Woe upon me. The son of Adam was ordered to perform the sajda. He performs it and he gains paradise. وَأُمِرْتُ بِالسُّجُودِ. And I was commanded to carry out the sujood. فَأَبَيْتُ فَلِيَ النَّارِ. I refused to prostrate. And what was given to me now was the punishment of hellfire. Because when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told Iblis to make sajda in front of Adam, this sajda is not sajda of ibadah. This is a sajda of sharaf, of tashrif. That Allah told Iblis to bow down in front of Adam as a sajda of nobility and rank, prestige and honor and dignity. That at the time of the Prophet has been lifted. It's been lifted, that you don't bow down in front of anything. It's not allowed. Because why? Anything that could lead towards shirk or concept of shirk of ibadah has been rebuked. That's what you find the ulama speak about in the hadith of Bukhari, whether a person can pray in front of the fire. Is it allowed? A discussion takes place. Some ulama say it's not allowed. Why? Because people may think that you're doing what? You're worshipping the fire, because they are fire worshippers, aren't they? The people of Persian or the Faris that we find, they worship the fire. That's what they have to keep on igniting the fire. To this day, the fire has been running for I don't know how many centuries or whatever years. They have this sacred ceremony. They have the person has to come and make sure the fire is still burning. They're fire worshippers. That's why you even say that even when we go to the graveyard, there's some people they get very offended that some people don't raise their hands and make dua in front of the graves. Because Islamically, some ulama say that people from a distance who's a non-Muslim or someone doesn't have the right faith will think, what are you doing at the grave? You're making dua to the grave for what? To help you. That's why you have to understand what Islam eradicates any element of a thought of shirk. Even though you could say, I'm making dua for the person, not to the person. But from a distance, persons who are non-Muslim will think you're doing what? You're making dua to the person. You're asking this person. So that's why a person needs to be vigilant to teach our society that sometimes you go to the graveyard, don't make dua raising your hands. It's not a sunnah you have to do. It's sunnah to obviously make dua for them, that we're going to join them and ask Allah to forgive them and to pardon them. But to teach our community that certain things you don't have to do them, because that's what a bid'ah becomes. And innovation becomes something which is done on a regular basis and people think it's a part of what? Of ibadah. So when people think it's a part of ibadah, for example, making dua after salah, When if you don't do it, and people say, oh, salah wasn't done properly, it wasn't complete, it's incorrect, he's not a proper imam. What does that mean now? You think that dua is now part of what? The salah. See what happens now? Now we think it's part of the salah. When you think it's part of the salah, it now becomes a what? It becomes a bid'ah. Because technically, as we mentioned, it's not part of the salah. As-salah min at-takbir ila taslim. Salah is from the takbir to the taslim. When you make the takbir, that's what's called takbiratul ihram. Why is it called ihram? Carries the meaning of haram. That once you say Allahu Akbar, everything you normally do is haram. You can't eat, you can't drink, you can't talk, it's forbidden. And then when you make the takbir to taslim, the takbir of giving salam, you've now come out of the prayer. That anything you normally do, you can do. You can talk, you can whatever you want to do, you're allowed to do. But in that state, you're not allowed to do it. So that when you continues this practice after the salah, and people think it's part of the prayer, this is what makes it something to be an innovation. هَذَانِ خَصْمَانِ اخْتَصَمُوا فِي رَبِّهِمْ. These two individuals, they argue regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So here Ibn Kathir begins to mention who are these people who are arguing regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One view he mentions from going back to Imam Bukhari, that the companions considering this referring to the battle of Badr. That the two groups, not just arguing, that they met one another. On one side you find Ali, Hamza and Ubaidah. On the other side you find fighting against Shayba, Utbah and Al-Walid. So this is the Hadani Khasman Ikhtasamu. Whether we take the physical, literal meaning, that the one group facing the other individuals, the duel that took place between the believers and the disbelievers. Also, the second view is there's a dispute between the Christians, the people of the book, and the Muslims. Because the Christians or the people of the book were saying, our prophets came before you, our books came before you, and so we're more virtuous than you. Hadani khasman ikhtasamu fi rabbihim. وَالَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا قُطِّعَ لَهُمْ ثِيَابُ مِنْ نَارٍ يُصَبُّ مِنْ فَوْقِ رُؤُوسِهِمُ الْحَمِيمُ. But the Muslims argue that our prophet is the final prophet and the final revelation given to the Prophet ﷺ. Then other views come between the one who lies and rejects, between Jannah, the hellfire and paradise. This argument is taking place between the believers and the disbelieving individuals. You find this punishment given to them, يُسْحَرُ بِهِ مَا فِي بُطُونِهِمْ وَالْجُلُودِ. This punishment which is poured down upon them. It burns all the way from their head all the way down their bodies and even their skins. And look at this harmful punishment. How Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even just read the tafsir and read the description, it scares the individual. Of the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَلَهُمْ مَقَامِعُ مِنْ حَدِيدٍ. There will be hooks and spikes of iron that will be snatching these individuals, holding them down, fetters holding them down. كُلَّمَا أَرَادُوا أَنْ يَخْرُجُوا مِنْهَا. Every time they want to come out of it. كُلَّمَا أَرَادُوا أَنْ يَخْرُجُوا مِنْهَا مِنْ غَمٍّ. Because the sorrow that they're in, أُعِيدُوا فِيهَا, they'll be returned back to it. فِيهَا وَذُوقُوا عَذَابَ الْحَرِيقِ. And we told him, taste the punishment of this evil chastisement. And so there's no escaping from hellfire of these individuals. إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُدْخِلُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. إِنَّ اللَّهَ. As if it's not saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that the believers is saying that as the believers are totally separate. That is not making comparison between the disbelievers and the believers, saying that in Allah, that indeed Allah will give this to the believing individuals. And as we mentioned previously, this is common inside the Quran. That when Allah speaks about the disbelievers, Allah will speak about the believers. Allah speaks about the punishment, Allah will speak about the reward. Sometimes it will be the punishment first, then the reward after. Sometimes the reward first and the punishment after. That's the Sunnah Manhajul Quran. You find that throughout the Quran. Allah now is describing the believers, what they have, yalbasoon. Allah mentions yalbasoon, doesn't say libasuhum. Other places Allah mentions libasum. Here Allah says yalbasoon, they wear. The ulama say this is tajaddud. That every time in paradise they're wearing new clothing. So not just their clothing, it's just renewed, revitalized every time inside. What else does Allah mention in paradise for these individuals? Jannatin tajri min tahti al-anhar, yani gardens whereby rivers flow. Yuhallawna fiha min asawir. They will be granted these bracelets. They will be beautified with these bracelets min dhahabin wa lu'lu'a, from gold and pearls. Wa libasum fiha harir, and their clothing will be one of silk. All these ornaments which are haram for men in this dunya, the wearing of gold, the wearing of silk, and even some ulama speak about anything prized For a man, they should avoid it. Anything which is prized as a form of jewelry, ornamentation, a man should avoid it as for something which is for women. As we find in a hadith that a person, لا تلبس الحرير ولا الديباج, don't wear silk, or dibaj is a form of pure silk في الدنيا. فإنه من لبسه في الدنيا لم يلبسه في الآخرة. Whoever wears it in this dunya will not wear it inside al-akhirah. وهدوء إلى الطيب من القول وهدوء إلى صراط الحميد. We find وهدوء إلى الطيب, they'll be guided to طيب. What is this طيب من القول? They'll be guided towards the good words, whether it be the literal meaning of speech. We find ulama say it carries the meaning of al-Quran. They'll be guided to the Quran. So excessive reading the Quran leads you to paradise. وهدوء إلى القول الطيب قول لا إله إلا الله. They're making the dhikr of La ilaha illallah. وإلى الأذكار, to the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all what these people will be guided towards. إن الذين كفروا ويصدون عن سبيل الله والمسجد الحرام الذي جعلناه للناس سواء العاكف فيه والباد ومن يرد فيه بإلحاد بظلم نذقه من عذاب أليم. Verse number 25. إن الذين كفروا. From here, the beginning of discussion begins about Hajj. So in these 78 verses, the first quarter or so, first 24 verses, will be just speaking about the last day, about the reward, about the punishment. And now comes the main theme of Al-Hajj. And that's why the Quran is unique, it's strange at times. Sometimes, look at Al-Baqarah, as we mentioned, 286 verses, and Al-Baqarah is only mentioned 2 or 3 times. But it becomes the main theme, or the main title of this surah, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best why. Even some of the surahs which speak about the prophets, like Surah Yunus, I think Yunus is only mentioned like once. The whole surah is called Yunus, and only once his name is mentioned there. Obviously we can understand Surah Yusuf, and so many times the name Yusuf is mentioned there. But why Yunus, the 10th surah of the Quran, only once his name is mentioned, the whole surah? And remember, as a side point, names of the Quran are tawqifiyah. They're from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That the Prophet ﷺ gave the surah, gave it a name, and you take that view that this is the name of the surah. So find that these individuals, now the discussion begins to take place about Hajj. That those individuals, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا وَيَصُدُّونَ عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ وَالْمَسْجِدِ الْحَرَامِ. Those individuals who disbelieve and prevent people from following the path of Allah and coming to Masjid al-Haram. الَّذِي جَعَلْنَاهُ لِلنَّاسِ سَوَاءً الْآكِفِ. That we made everybody the same, whether that person be muqimin. Al-Akif carries the meaning of al-muqimin, those who are resident of Makkah, and those who are fihi wal-bad. Wal-bad who are ahlul badiyah, people who are journeying and coming to the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whoever they may be, travelers or residents of Makkah, they're all the same. Whoever tries to prevent the people of entering Makkah or harm the people inside Makkah, وَمَنْ يُرِدْ بِهِ بِإِلْحَادٍ. Whoever wants ilhad, whoever wants shirk, بِظُلْمٍ, and tajawuz, oppression inside the haram, نُذِقْهُ مِنْ عَذَابٍ أَلِيمٍ. Will make that person taste an evil punishment. Go back to Surah Al-Fil. أَلَمْ تَرَ كَيْفَ فَعَلَ رَبُّكَ بِأَصْحَابِ الْفِيلِ. Read the tafsir of that surah. That even though they were mushrikun, the Quraysh, that when Abraha came to harm the Kaaba, to dismantle the Kaaba, to destroy the Kaaba, what did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala do? That was a lesson to the mushrikun that time. Allah protected the Kaaba, that no individual is ever going to be able to harm the Kaaba until the end of time, which has been prophesied that it would come, and a person will come and he will dismantle and break the Kaaba. That's also going to be obviously towards the end of time that we find. For that individual with evil punishment inside this dunya, inside the akhirah. Also, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا يَصُدُّونَ عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. Those who prevent the people from coming to the house of Allah, shows that this ayah is a Medinan verse. It's a Medinan verse. This is a proof that this verse is a Medinan verse, because now it's speaking about going back to the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, performing the Hajj and performing the Umrah that we find in Surah Al-Baqarah as well. You find a similar verse exists inside Surah Al-Baqarah as well. It looks like we might have to come back for a third session to complete this, because only on verse 26 and time for make the adhan in a few minutes. وَإِذْ بَوَّأْنَا لِإِبْرَاهِيمَ مَكَانَ الْبَيْتِ. That indeed we selected for Ibrahim مَكَانَ الْبَيْتِ أَلَّا تُشْرِكْ بِهِ شَيْئًا وَطَهِّرْ بَيْتِيَ لِلطَّائِفِينَ وَالْقَائِمِينَ وَالرُّكَّعِ السُّجُودِ. And purify this house, my house, the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, لِلطَّائِفِينَ, those who circumambulate the house, those who visit the house or stay in the house, وَالرُّكَّعِ السُّجُودِ, those who are bowing and prostrating. So this shows that Asul Hajj is ikhlasul tawheed fi qulubin nas. The essence of Hajj is pure sincerity towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As we find the fada'il or the virtues of Hajj is iqamatul tawheed. It is establishing the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we find that طهر بيتي, to purify the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, للطائفين والقائمين. And we mentioned previously as well that those who are قائمين and those who are طائفين, those who are there and those who are making the tawaf. And we mentioned, the ulama mentioned that a person who visits the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they're not resident, is it better for them to read supererogatory prayers or to perform the tawaf, the circumambulation going around the Kaaba? They say if you're visiting, like for many of us, we go for Hajj, we go for Umrah, we don't reside inside the Mecca, so we should make excessive tawaf rather than excessive prayers. Obviously the fard prayer, you have to stop everything. So they said it's a preference to make tawaf because you're not there for many days. But people qa'imeen, people are resident, what's better for them, to make tawaf or to make salah? For them to make extra salah, not to make extra tawaf, is how ulama, Ibn Kathir and other ulama begin to describe of what we should do when we're entering the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَأَذِّن فِي النَّاسِ بِالْحَجِّ, give the call of Hajj. So this is Ibrahim alayhi salam who's been given this commandment. وَأَذِّن فِي النَّاسِ بِالْحَجِّ يَأْتُوكَ رِجَالًا وَعَلَى كُلِّ دَامِرٍ يَأْتِينَ مِنْ كُلِّ فَجٍّ عَمِيقٍ. So Ibrahim alayhi salam makes this call out to the people. وَأَذِّن فِي النَّاسِ. Remember we mentioned inside Surah Ibrahim, when he makes this call, no one is there. Allah told Ibrahim, just make this call. It's an empty land. He just made the call. وَأَذِّن فِي النَّاسِ. Your job is just to إِنْ عَلَيْكَ إِلَّا الْبَلَاغِ. For us, it's just to convey the message. It's not for us to have the results. Just call. Ibrahim makes a call. Allah says, يَأْتُوكَ رِجَالًا. They're going to come to you. One wording say, Rijalan carries the meaning of men. But here it means, Rijal means walking. Ala rijal. Rijalan is the plural of rijal, of legs. They come either walking, وَعَلَى كُلِّ دَامِرٍ, or they come upon every riding beast. يَأْتِينَ مِنْ كُلِّ فَجٍّ عَمِيقٍ. They come from every makan ba'id, or from every high valley or location. They'll come from there. Meaning that all these people will come responding to this call. That now look at how many people have responded to the call of Ibrahim alayhi salam that we find in returning to the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. لِيَشْهَدُوا مَنَافِعَ لَهُمْ. That they may witness manafi' lahum, see the benefits of Hajj. What's the benefits of Hajj? Is jawaz al-bay', buying and selling. That's what we mentioned in Yawm al-Jummah, that people go and perform the Hajj. On the way they're buying and selling their commodities to get that money, carry on what they're doing to get to Hajj. It's allowed in Hajj. Even outside Hajj it's allowed. The people buying and selling, is nothing wrong with that. وَيَذْكُرُ اسْمَ اللَّهِ فِي أَيَّامٍ مَعْلُومَاتٍ. That they may remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala regarding the ayyam al-nahr, the days of sacrifice, على ما رزقهم من بهيمة الأنعام, regarding the cattle that have been given to them. فَكُلُوا مِنْهَا, eat from this sacrifice. وَأَطْعِمُوا الْبَائِسَ الْفَقِيرِ, and to give some of the food to the destitute and the poor and the needy individual in that dire state, to give it to them, inshallah. We'll have to, like I said, we'll have to come back on another occasion and to complete this reading of Surah Al-Hajj. But for now we can go back and ourselves to complete, at least in these few days of Dhul Hijjah that remain, go back and read the English translation, or prior to that read the Arabic of Surah Al-Hajj, the 22nd chapter of the Quran, in the middle or towards the end of the 17th juz, coming to the 18th juz, to read that inshallah, and to read the Arabic, as I mentioned, the 78 verses, and to read the English as well, inshallah, so we can be abreast with the knowledge of Hajj, or these days of Hajj fast approaching us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us all tawfiq and ikhlas, and accept it from all of us, inshallah. وَقُولُ قَوْلِ هَذَا وَأَسْتَغْفِرُ لَلِي وَلَكُمْ وَلِجَمِيعِ الْمُسْلِمِينَ فَاسْتَغْفِرُوهُ إِنَّهُ هُوَ الْغَفُورُ الرَّحِيمُ. الحمد لله رب العالمين وأصلي وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تمسك بسنته إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. As we heard the recitation, the final part of Surah Al-Hajj, and what comes to mind, that actually the name Ibrahim alayhi salam only occurs in the end, or it occurs in the middle here. It mentions about وَإِذْ بَوَّأْنَا لِإِبْرَاهِيمَ. It only twice occurs inside the surah, when the whole theme is speaking about Ibrahim alayhi salam. And as we mentioned, the Quran is unique in the way it delivers or mentions certain things. Even inside Surah Al-Hajj, whereby here it speaks about al-balad bil lam ta'rif, but inside Surah Al-Baqarah it mentions it without lam ta'rif. Same dua is mentioned by Ibrahim alayhi salam, but a slight variation. And once again, ulama begin to discuss about these variations that occur inside the Quran. Why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mention in Surah Al-Baqarah, where Ibrahim alayhi salam made that dua, Ibrahim said, Rabbi ij'al hadha baladan amina. But inside Surah Al-Hajj, make this al-balada with it, lam ta'rif, and there's a discussion regarding that as well. It shows the accurate nature of the Quran, the accurate nature of the ulama of Tafsir. Also the dua of Ibrahim alayhi salam. Remember the beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah, the end of the first juz, Ibrahim alayhi salam, he makes this supplication. ربنا وابعث فيهم رسولا من أنفسهم يتلو عليهم آياتك ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة ويزكيهم إنك أنت العزيز الحكيم. That is the dua of Ibrahim alayhi salam for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, whereby in the hadith is mentioned, Ana da'watu Ibrahim, I'm the call of Ibrahim. Now the response of that dua comes 3 different times inside the Quran. And there's a variation. If you look at the format of the dua of Ibrahim alayhi salam, and look at the response of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether it be inside Surah Al-Imran, لَقَدْ مَنَّ اللَّهُ عَلَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ إِذْ بَعْثَ فِيهِمْ رَسُولًا مِنْ أَنفُسِهِمْ يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِهِ وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابُ الْحِكْمَةِ. Look at the variation. Ibrahim alayhi salam, the end of his dua was send one who's going to purify them. Allah begins the main task of the Prophet alayhi salam is to purify them. That's why it shows the uniqueness of the Quran and nature of the Quran. The other place inside the Quran, where does it occur? The same dua occurs inside Surah Al-Imran, inside Surah As-Saf, and one other place inside the Quran. This dua occurs. So one dua is one dua of Ibrahim alayhi salam, and 3 times Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if not mistaken, responds to it. So returning back to Surah Al-Hajj, as we mentioned, the main theme is a theme of Tawheed, of the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we're just going through a rough reading of these verses, just to give us, even if we achieve just by going through this surah, for some of us this may be the first time during this whole week we've read the whole surah of the Quran, from the beginning to the end. And I don't want to sound sarcastic, but that's quite bad. Do you understand? That we should be reading at least a juz of the Quran in a day. That's what a person should be reading. But if a person can't do that, at least have a page in a day, every day in the morning, whatever time. It doesn't have to be necessarily spiritually, in the morning, or Quran al-Fajr inna kana, Quran al-Fajr kana mashhooda. Qira'ah of the Quran in the morning is supposed to be blessed, as ulama make tafsir this ayah. But any moment a person can read the Quran, end of Asr, during after Dhuhr, whatever it may be that you choose, you can just read the Quran. But have a moment, what's known as your wird, your daily recitation of Quran. وَنُنَزِّلُ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ مَا هُوَ شِفَاءٌ وَرَحْمَةٌ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ. We send down from the Quran that which is a shifa, that which is a cure. So just physically reading the Quran becomes a cure for all the different ailments that we have throughout our lives. So ذَلِكَ وَمَنْ يُعَظِّمْ حُرُمَاتِ اللَّهِ. So verse number 30. I'm not sure where we stopped, but I'm sure we stopped around this ayah. ذَلِكَ وَمَنْ يُعَظِّمْ حُرُمَاتِ اللَّهِ. That is whoever respects so verse number 30 of Surah Al-Hajj, that is whoever magnifies, respects حُرُمَاتِ اللَّهِ احترام بِأَعْمَالِ الْحَجِّ. So ulama says that this is whoever respects the actions of Hajj. فَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَهُ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِ. That is good for him in front of his Lord. وَحِلَّتْ لَكُمُ الْأَنْعَامُ إِلَّا مَا يُتْلَى عَلَيْكُمْ. And indeed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made halal for you the al-an'am. Al-an'am is the cattle, the beasts, all types of halal food which has been allowed. إِلَّا مَا يُتْلَى عَلَيْكُمْ. Except for that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, مَا يُتْلَى عَلَيْكُمْ, that which Allah has made forbidden for you, or that which is recited upon you. Al-ishara to what is it referring back to? Because in Al-An'am it mentions about those animals which you're not allowed to eat, or the way that they've been sacrificed, etc. Inside Al-An'am specifically speaks about it, and also it touches upon it inside Surah Al-Ma'idah as well. فَاجْتَنِبُوا الرِّجْسَ مِنَ الْأَوْثَانِ وَاجْتَنِبُوا قَوْلَ الزُّورِ. فَاجْتَنِبُوا al-ijtinaba ashaddu min al-tahrim. So ulama al-fiqh, usul al-fiqh, they speak about when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran, حُرِّمَتْ عَلَيْكُمْ أُمَّهَاتُكُمْ, that your mothers are haram for you to marry, and likewise your daughters, etc. The ayah contains inside Surah An-Nisa. That is something severe, haram. We all know the kalima haram. If something says haram inside the Quran, inside the hadith, is forbidden. But sometimes the Quran uses a word far more deeper and more powerful than that. فَاجْتَنِبُوا. For example, inside Surah Al-Ma'idah, verses number 90 and 91, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا إِنَّمَا الْخَمْرُ وَالْمَيْسِرُ وَالْأَنْصَابُ وَالْأَزْلَامُ رِجْسٌ مِّنْ عَمَلِ الشَّيْطَانِ فَاجْتَنِبُوهُ لَعَلَّكُمْ تُفْلِحُونَ. So here ulama mentioned al-ijtinaba ashaddu tahrim. That when Allah says, subhanahu wa ta'ala says, fajtanibu, is more powerful than saying something is haram upon you. Both of them are haram. But ijtinaba means that from at any cost, at all expenses, just stay away from ever going anything to that which has been mentioned. So here inside Surah Al-Ma'idah, إِنَّمَا الْخَمْرُ وَالْمَيْسِرُ وَالْأَنْصَابُ وَالْأَزْلَامُ. So these 4 things are mentioned. Don't go anywhere near alcohol, any intoxicants. Maisir, gambling, any form of gambling. The rest obviously, ansab, azlam doesn't concern us, sacrificing on the divine stones or the throwing of the arrows, etc. that we find. That possibly doesn't concern us this moment in time. But there are people out there who probably practice these practices of shirk that they do, sacrificing of the animals, etc. that they do. But the first 2 still concerns us today. That person from any, so totally stay away from. That's when the hadith is something severe. Hadith inside Sahih Muslim that 10 individuals are cursed. And many times people come and ask this question, I'm going to go to so and so restaurant, they serve alcohol there, is it allowed? The general answer, the ulama, is that if there's a dire need, that you're traveling or something and you have to stop and you have to eat some halal food or whatever it may be, then possibly. But if you have a choice, that a person should not sit in an environment where alcohol is being served. 10 individuals or 10 scenarios are mentioned in the hadith inside Sahih Muslim. The person who crushes the grapes, the person who packs the grapes, the person who delivers the grapes, the person who serves it, the person who sits on the table, the person who takes the money, paraphrasing the hadith. It's all cursed. There's no scope. Some people use the excuse, هذا للشرب للكفار. We give it to the disbelievers, let them drink whatever, maybe let them get drunk. No. If anything, a principle inside Islam, anything is made haram, إِذَا حُرِّمَ شَيْءٍ حُرِّمَ ثَمَنُهُ. If Allah makes something haram, then the price and the commodity and the dealing of it is all haram. It's all haram. And likewise, for another principle as well, whatever مَكَانَ كَثِيرُ حَرَامٍ فَقَلِيلُ حَرَامٍ. Actually, it's based upon a hadith inside Sahih Muslim. Whatever is forbidden in large amounts is forbidden what? In small amounts. It doesn't make this distinction that some people, they say, oh, if I don't get intoxicated, so I can drink. That's why sometimes you meet some non-Muslims say, I drink barrels and I don't get drunk. Does that now mean that alcohol is now halal for him? Or a person takes these drugs and substances that I smoke, whatever, and it doesn't affect my mind. Does it mean it now becomes halal? No. Because the Sharia looks at the maqasid, Sharia looks at the general intent. That the general rule is that a person takes intoxicants will become intoxicated. That's it. Finish. So Islam just prevents it all. Doesn't give this scope that maybe a person could be free from it and it should be allowed for them. So فَاجْتَنِبُوا الرِّجْسِ, stay away from كُلُّ الْأَوْثَانِ, stay from any form of idolatry or idol worship or from being from idols. وَاجْتَنِبُوا قَوْلَ الزُّورِ, and stay away from any qawlu zur. Obviously, specifically his meaning qawlu zur is here speaking about committing shirk with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala during the days of Hajj. But the general meaning of qawlu zur is any evil speech, any bad speech. So a person should stay away from, whether it be specifically any form of shirk or generally said shirk, or specifically any form of evil speech. حُنَفَاءَ لِلَّهِ غَيْرَ مُشْرِكِينَ بِهِ. So these individuals are hunafa. Hunafa is the plural of Hanif. Who was classified as Hanif? What's the whole theme about that we began with? Who's Hanif? Ibrahim alayhi salam. So it's all got Hunafa. These people all singling out Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Al-Hanif is a person la yamil ila shay, doesn't go lean towards something, is straight. So these individuals who are performing the Hajj, they're all straight, submitting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, غَيْرَ مُشْرِكِينَ بِهِ, not associating any partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why we find that the commandments inside the Quran about shirk and avoidance of shirk are severe inside the Quran, severe warnings. Inside Surah An-Nisa, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَغْفِرُ أَن يُشْرَكَ بِهِ وَيَغْفِرُ مَا دُونَ ذَلِكَ لِمَنْ يَشَاءُ. Twice Allah mentions inside the same surah. Inside Surah Al-Ma'idah, Allah mentions, إِنَّ مَنْ يُشْرِكْ بِاللَّهِ فَقَدْ حَرَّمَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ الْجَنَّةَ وَمَأْوَاهُ النَّارُ وَمَا لِلظَّالِمِينَ مِنْ أَنصَارٍ. Now here inside Surah Hajj, Allah mentions, وَمَنْ يُشْرِكْ بِاللَّهِ فَكَأَنَّمَا خَرَّ مِنَ السَّمَاءِ فَتَخْطَفُ الطَّيْرُ أَوْ تَحْوِي بِهِ رِيحُ فِي مَكَانٍ سَحِيقٍ. Another description is given here. That's why when people say, oh, why are people always speaking about shirk? Why do they talk about the importance of tawheed? It's the Quran. It's the Quran. It's something we shouldn't take it trivial. Look at the severe warnings. That the person who commits shirk with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the punishment is severe. The person who dies upon shirk, according to verse like Surah Al-Ma'idah, is forever doomed to the hellfire. Is doomed to the hellfire. That's the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So here Allah gives a description that وَمَنْ يُشْرِكْ بِاللَّهِ فَكَأَنَّمَا خَرَّ مِنَ السَّمَاءِ. Whoever commits shirk with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is either dropping from the heavens, from the sky, or the bird snatches him, or the wind blows him away to the faraway place. Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah, he mentioned that this parable, what does it mean? It means that shirk la yuqarribuka ila Allah. So a person who's committing shirk thinks brings them closer to Allah. A person goes to a grave, goes to a shrine, goes to somebody who's dead or whatever it may, makes dua thinking this is going to bring me closer to Allah. Even the Quran mentioned that man na'budhum illa liyuqarribuna ila Allahi zulfa. Even today Muslims say the same thing. We're not equating Muslims with mushrikun. Let's make that clear. That's what people get emotional that you're trying to say Muslims are mushriks. We're saying there's certain things that we do, which as Ibn Taymiyyah mentions, that an action of shirk doesn't mean you become a mushrik. An action of kufr doesn't make you become a kafir. It should be very crystal clear about that. When Allah says inside the Quran, this person is a kafir, don't try to apply that upon a person. Or a person commits shirk, say to another Muslim, you're a mushrik. Be very wary about that. Leave that for judges and ulama in senior positions. Because this is what's creating a lot of rancor and ill feeling inside our society, that people say, you're calling me a mushrik then. No, we're saying this is an action of shirk. An action of shirk is something very dangerous. It doesn't mean you are a mushrik, but it can lead you to become a mushrik. You know, even though some people would bluntly apply it upon a person, but we're saying we shouldn't do that. So it's saying that this action of shirk doesn't bring you close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why even that excuse that the Quraysh would use, they say that as well. We don't actually worship these idols and these statues. They are intermediaries to get us close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. مَا نَعْبُدُهُمْ إِلَّا لِيُقَرِّبُونَ إِلَى اللَّهِ زُلْفًا. So we're not even physically worshipping these idol statues. We think this is a wasila, a path that brings us close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But this is refuted inside the Quran. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala there's no paths to Allah via people or anything. Because Allah said inside the Quran, وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِ عَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيب. Allah says that if the servant asks about me, Allah says, I am close by. Allah doesn't say make an intermediary. And many times spoke about the linguistics of this. Allah never said فَقُلْ. Study the Quran in great detail. Every time a question is asked inside the Quran, يَسَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْأَهِلَّةِ يَسَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْمَحِيضِ يَسَلُونَكَ عَنِ الرُّوحِ يَسَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْخَمْرِ وَالْمَيْسِرِ. They ask you all these questions. Look at what the response always is. What is the response? قُلْ هُوَ أَذَى. Isn't it? The response is say it is harmful. Say this is the answer. Always the answer is قُلْ. قُلْ means say, O Muhammad to the people, this is what the verdict is. Now this place inside the Quran, question is asked again. The question is, وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِ عَنِّي. When the servant asks about me, the response isn't according to the linguistics of the Quran. And it can be plausible. Allah can say subhanahu wa ta'ala, فَقُلْ إِنِّي قَرِيب. Allah doesn't say that. Allah says, فَإِنِّي قَرِيب. Takes out who? Takes the most beloved individual out of the ayah. The Prophet Muhammad just says, فَإِنِّي قَرِيب. فَوْرِيَّة. Straight away. وَقَالَ رَبُّكُمُ ادْعُونِي أَسْتَجِبْ لَكُمْ. Your Lord said, call upon me and I will respond to your call. ذَلِكَ وَمَنْ يُعَظِّمْ شَعَائِرَ اللَّهِ فَإِنَّ مِنْ تَقْوَى الْقُلُوبِ. That is whoever respects the sha'air, بمعنى sha'ira, the symbols of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, فَإِنَّ مِنْ تَقْوَى الْقُلُوبِ. So it's not just relevant to Hajj, as ulama Tafsir mentioned. So whoever respecting the symbols of Muzdalifah, of Mina, of Arafah, the Kaaba, that's all respecting the symbols of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at that moment, at that time, at that place. But many ulama said this is any symbol of Allah. Whether it be the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Quran. That's why many times we find these debates that people begin to take place. Somebody might put the Quran on the floor and say, oh, it's allowed. Tayyib, it might be technically, it might be allowed. But is that respecting the symbols of Allah? What does it lead to? It leads to what? Argumentation, emotional feelings towards people. So it's the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We should give it that due respect should be given to it. Obviously the greatest respect is obviously implementing and reading it. But these are all symbols. The house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a symbol of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. People who drive past, at least some of them, when they see the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they turn down their music, or they might be doing something inappropriate. They respect that. Maybe it could be a cultural element, but still that's a good sign that people are respecting the symbols of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَإِنَّهَا مِن تَقْوَى الْقُلُوبِ. This is indeed the actions of the heart, a piety of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَلِكُلِّ أُمَّةٍ جَعَلْنَا مَنْسَكًا. For every single ummah, we've made a mansak. Mansak is either the mode, the location of performance of Hajj, or it means the general practice of religious behavior. That every ummah has its rules and regulations that they follow out. لِيَذْكُرُوا اسْمَ اللَّهِ عَلَى مَا رَزَقَهُمْ. To remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala about that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has provided them from amongst what? مِن بَهِيمَةِ الْأَنْعَامِ. From the cattle which is given to them during these days of sacrifice. فَإِلَهُكُمْ إِلَهٌ وَاحِدٌ فَلَهُ أَسْلِمُوا وَبَشِّرِ الْمُخْبِتِينَ. And indeed your Lord is one, so submit to Him. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is throughout this surah is speaking about يَسْتَحِقُّ الْعِبَادَ وَحْدُهُ, that everything is about making ibadah only to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَلَهُ أَسْلِمُوا. Submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَبَشِّرِ الْمُخْبِتِينَ. And give glad tidings, mukhbitin bima'na al-khashi'in. Those who are submissive to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, give glad tidings to these individuals. And then Allah describes them, الَّذِينَ إِذَا ذُكِرَ اللَّهُ وَجِلَتْ قُلُوبُهُم. When they remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, wajilat bima'na khafat. Their hearts begin to become fearful. Their hearts begin to shake. Just like in the beginning of Al-An'am, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned the description of the believing individuals. الَّذِينَ إِذَا تُلِيَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتُهُ زَادَتْهُمْ إِيمَانًا وَعَلَى رَبِّهِمْ يَتَوَكَّلُونَ. When they hear the ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, increases them in iman. And they place their trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَجِلَتْ قُلُوبُهُمْ وَالصَّابِرِينَ عَلَى مَا أَصَابَهُمْ. Now comes the next stage, that these individuals, they remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We can all do that. وَالصَّابِرِينَ عَلَى مَا أَصَابَهُمْ. They are patient regarding whatever calamities befall them. Just like inside Surah Al-Baqarah, الَّذِينَ إِذَا أَصَابَتْهُمْ مُصِيبَةٌ قَالُوا إِنَّا لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّا إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ. That when a musibah comes upon them, a calamity or hardship or difficulty, they say, to Allah we belong and to Allah we return. These are the individuals who are the patient individuals. وَالْمُقِيمِ الصَّلَاةِ وَمِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ يُنْفِقُونَ. Then the rest of the actions are people of taqwa. That's what it's trying to say. These are the people of taqwa. Those who remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, their hearts become fearful. Those who are patient regarding calamities. Those who are establishing the prayer. وَمِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ يُنْفِقُونَ. And they spend مِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ. They spend not from their own wealth. They spend from مِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ, from that which we've given to them. This is malullah. This is the wealth of Allah. It's not my wealth, it's not your wealth. Allah describes it. This is the wealth of Allah. Allah's bestowed, given it to us, entrusts us with His wealth. That's why when the Quran speaks about مَنْ ذَا الَّذِي يُقْرِضُ اللَّهَ قَرْضًا حَسَنًا. Who's going to give a good loan to Allah? Does Allah need a loan? Does Allah need our wealth? But it's a form of sigha, a form of discussion. It's a form of honor. This is who's going to give that money to Allah. Allah doesn't need that money, but it's a form of sharaf. That is, you're as if you're presenting that in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that who's going to have that conviction or that sacrifice of giving it in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَالْبُدْنَ جَعَلْنَاهَا لَكُمْ مِنْ شَعَائِرِ اللَّهِ لَكُمْ فِيهَا خَيْرٌ. وَالْبُدْنَ, al-budn is al-ibl, is the camel. And the reason why it's being given the name budn, because budn just means something which is great in size. Because a camel is such a great big size, it's been given the title budn. But also some ulama mentioned al-budn contains camels and cows, and both of them are obviously meaty animals. So we made the camel, we made it as a symbol for you to, a symbol of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Fiha khair, in this goodness. فَاذْكُرُوا اسْمَ اللَّهِ عَلَيْهَا صَوَافٍ. Remember the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the dhabhi. When you begin to sacrifice the camel, sawaf bima'na qa'ima, whilst it's standing. Because the way that you sacrifice a camel is different from you sacrifice other animals. You have to sacrifice while it's standing. That's why, they show how they sacrifice a camel by, holding it and then just, slitting its throat. Or we find, فَإِذَا وَجَبَتْ جُنُوبُهَا, or when it saqatat, when it drops on the ground. So either you can put ropes around its legs and pull it down, and it drops on the ground, then you sacrifice the animal. فَكُلُوا مِنْهَا وَأَطْعِمُوا الْقَانِعَ وَالْمُعْتَرَ. So eat from the sacrifice that you've offered. وَأَطْعِمُوا الْقَانِعَ, and give to the one in dire need. وَالْمُعْتَرَ, qani' is the one who asks for the food. وَالْمُعْتَرَ is the person in need who doesn't ask for the food. You have to go and search and give it to that individual. كَذَلِكَ سَخَّرْنَاهَا لَكُمْ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَشْكُرُونَ. And this is what we've subjugated, made easy for you, that you may give thanks to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because remember, these are the days of Ayyamut Tashriq, Ayyamul Nahr, which have just finished now after Asr time. That was the end of the days of sacrifice. Inna a'tainaka al-kawthar fasalli li rabbika wanhar. So this is Nahr. Nahr, the literal meaning of Nahr is chest. So wanhar means to obviously sacrifice above the chest. You sacrifice the animals. And just to alleviate the environment, some people try to use it as istidlal. فَصَلِّ لِرَبِّكَ وَانْحَرْ. That wanhar huna bima'na fasalli, pray the salah and place your hands on the chest. They try to make istidlal of this verse to make it, this is not accurate to use this evidence from the Quran, but that just came to my mind, so maybe you might come across somebody trying to use evidence from the Quran to prove the view. لَن يَنَالَ اللَّهُ لُحُومُهَا وَلَا دِمَاؤُهَا. Then the main theme of Hajj, or the main theme of this ayah, is that the blood and the sacrifice, the meat, does not go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And even Jahiliyyah, you find that they used to rub the blood on the Kaaba when they used to perform Hajj. That's why when Hajj comes, you read the whole seerah of the Jahiliyyah practice of Hajj we spoke about in the beginning, and how Islam came and just codified it. So they always used to respect the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the things they used to do is nothing but shirkiyat that used to take place there. So the house had to be وَإِذْ بَوَّأْنَا لِإِبْرَاهِيمَ. We told Ibrahim now to do what? To purify the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Likewise inside Surah Al-Baqarah, Allah says to Ibrahim and Ismail, أَن طَهِّرَ بَيْتِيَ لِلطَّائِفِينَ وَالْعَاكِفِينَ وَالرُّكَّعِ السُّجُودِ. أَن طَهِّرَ بَيْتِيَ, to purify the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this blood and this meat that we offer the sacrifice, this doesn't go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. كَذَلِكَ سَخَّرْهَا لَكُمْ لِتُكَبِّرُوا اللَّهَ عَلَى مَا هَدَاكُمْ وَبَشِّرِ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. So this is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala subjugate this for us, that we may لِتُكَبِّرُوا اللَّهَ عَلَى مَا هَدَاكُمْ, that we may be making praise and making takbir of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala عَلَى مَا هَدَاكُمْ. Just like inside the ayat of Ramadan, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes a similar concept is mentioned inside there. شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن هدى للناس وبينات من الهدى والفرقان فمن شهد منكم الشهر فليصم ومن كان مريضا على سفر فعدة من أيام أخرى. Was it the other part? Second part is it mentions about praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن هدى للناس وبينات من الهدى والفرقان فمن Umair, where you gone? That's what I'm looking for. وَلِتُكَبِّرُوا اللَّهَ عَلَى مَا هَدَاكُمْ وَلَعَلَّكُمْ تَشْكُرُونَ. Look at the same context. That's speaking about Ramadan. And Allah saying that the whole purpose of Ramadan is to make takbir, to make remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. عَلَى مَا هَدَاكُمْ, regarding that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has guided us towards. And same thing here. Allah has mentioned لِتُكَبِّرُوا اللَّهَ عَلَى مَا هَدَاكُمْ وَبَشِّرِ الْمُحْسِنِينَ, and give glad tidings to the muhsineen. First we mentioned mukhbitin, this time is mentioned muhsineen, the doers of good. إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُدَافِعُ عَنِ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُحِبُّ كُلَّ خَوَّانٍ كَفُورٍ. إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُدَافِعُ عَنِ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. Indeed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala defends those individuals who believe. And from here, ulama said, from here now the ayat become Medinan verses. Remember we said that primarily the surah is a Meccan verse, and we said that some ulama went to the view that it primarily is a Medinan verse, but we said, as we mentioned, that majority of the ulama said this surah is mukhallat, is a mixed surah. There's ayat which are Meccan and ayat which are Medinan inside this surah, and these are the verses which begin to clearly show that this is the Medinan context. Indeed, Allah defends those individuals who believe. Inna Allah la yuhibbu kulla khawanin kafur. Allah doesn't like any treacherous, any ungrateful, any individual. And then comes, which is clearly Medinan, أُذِنَ لِلَّذِينَ يُقَاتَلُونَ بِأَنَّهُمْ ظُلِمُوا. Permission will grant to those individuals that they may fight for those who were oppressed. Remember, jihad was only legislated where? In Medina. There was no jihad, there's no physical struggle. There was jihad of, as the Quran mentions in Surah Al-Furqan, وَجَاهِدٌ بِهِ جِهَادًا كَبِيرًا. Strive against them, bihi, with it. Al-Furqan is a Meccan surah. Strive against him via the Quran, give da'wah via the Quran. But here, that the jihad becomes a different jihad that comes here now. That now, أُذِنَ لِلَّذِينَ يُقَاتَلُونَ. So Allah didn't say, أُذِنَ لِلَّذِينَ يُجَاهِدُونَ. It says, يُقَاتَلُونَ. That now you may fight back against those who are fighting against you. That was only prescribed inside Medina. بِأَنَّمْ ظُلِمُوا. Because they were oppressed, they were harmed. Now you may retaliate back. وَإِنَّ اللَّهَ عَلَى نَصْرِهِمْ لَقَدِيرٌ. Indeed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala over their victory, is going to grant that over those individuals. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala becomes the protector of the individual, then there's no one who can overcome that individual. So verse number 40 we find, obviously we have to hasten through it. الَّذِينَ أُخْرِجُوا مِنْ دِيَارٍ بِغَيْرِ حَقٍّ. Those individuals, Allah then describes these individuals who've been oppressed, who've been expelled out of their homes. Like in other places it mentions inside the Quran, those who say that their Lord is only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Here as well, إِلَّا أَن يَقُولُوا رَبُّنَا اللَّهِ. Only because they say that they believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَلَوْلَا دَفْعُ اللَّهِ النَّاسَ بَعْضُهُم بِبَعْضٍ. If it hadn't been that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala places certain people to place other people into check or to make them dominant over other individuals, لَهُدِّمَتْ صَوَامِعُ وَبِيَعٌ. You find that these certain buildings would have been demolished. So what is Sawami'u? Sawami'u is a monastery where the monks reside in. That is classified as Sawami'. Wabi'un is Kana'is, is the buildings of the Christians. Salawatun is the Kana'isul Yahud, is the synagogues, the places of worship of the Jews. Wa masajidu yudhkaru fiha ismullahi kathira. And the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whereby the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is made abundantly. As if it's giving sanctity to religious buildings. So wherever the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioned, then Islamically we have to show respect towards those buildings. وَلَا يَنْصُرَنَّ اللَّهُ مَنْ يَنْصُرُهُ إِنَّ اللَّهُ لَقَوِيٌّ عَزِيزٌ. Indeed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants victory or support to whomever He wants. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَقَوِيٌّ عَزِيزٌ. Indeed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Qawi, is the Almighty, and He is the all-powerful is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why we find that a person makes the effort, but their total reliance is in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As Allah mentions in the Quran, وَمَا رَمَيْتَ إِذْ رَمَيْتَ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ رَمَى. On that day when you threw, it wasn't you that was throwing, Ya Rasulullah. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It wasn't you that was throwing. You just done the physical act of throwing, but those stones and those pebbles went all the way into the eyes and the faces of the disbelieving individuals. That was by the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. الَّذِينَ إِمَّكَّنَّاهُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ. So these individuals, when they become powerful and dominant on the land, when they do become controlling upon the land, what are the sifat? What are the characteristics of people who are placed inside authority or become some form of authority upon a certain environment? أَقَامُوا الصَّلَاةِ. They establish the prayer. وَآتَوُوا الزَّكَاةِ. They give the zakah. وَأَمَرُوا بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَنَهَوْا عَنِ الْمُنكَرِ وَلِلَّهِ عَاقِبَةُ الْأُمُورِ. And they forbid the evil. And look at the ishara. Allah speaking about these are the things that you need to do upon the face of this earth. Establish a prayer, give the zakah, order the good and forbid the evil. And what does Allah say at the end? وَلِلَّهِ عَاقِبَةُ الْأُمُورِ. That the real vision is what? Is al-akhirah. إِنَّ الْأَرْضَ يُورِثُهَا مَنْ يَشَاءُ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ وَالْعَاقِبَةُ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. So even Allah gives you dominance, power on the earth, or whatever, control on the earth. Look at the ishara. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالْعَاقِبَةُ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. The final abode, the hereafter, is better for the pious people. As if the end goal isn't this dunya. And that's why some people, they think, the people who speak about Islam or the dominant Islam, they want power, they want glory, they want control. It may come, it may go, it may happen, it may not happen. Even though it will happen, that's a fact, there's a side point. But the point being is that that's not what Muslims are searching for. Because even when they do have it, the end goal is what? It's al-akhirah, is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving inside the ishara, inside this verse as well. وَإِن يُكَذِّبُوكَ فَقَدْ كَذَّبَتْ قَبْلَهُمْ قَوْمُ نُوحٍ وَعَادٍ وَثَمُودٍ. If they reject you, they belie you, then indeed the people that came before, whether it be the people of Nuh, Wa'ad and Thamud, they rejected their prophets as well. Why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala move from now the story of about Tawheed, the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the importance of Hajj, speaking indirectly about Ibrahim alayhi salam, speaking about the camels, what we have to sacrifice, what taqwa is. Allah then moves on to وَإِن يُكَذِّبُوكَ فَقَدْ كَذَّبَتْ قَبْلَهُمْ قَوْمُ نُوحٍ وَعَادٍ وَثَمُودٍ. Why does Allah move to another theme? To show the Quraysh that you are in power, in control. Look back in history, how we destroyed people that came before you. وَقَوْمُ إِبْرَهِيمَ وَقَوْمُ لُوط. and the people of Ibrahim and the people of Lut, that whoever didn't believe at that time, that they were destroyed. So it doesn't make a difference whether you're at the time of the prophets or how powerful you are. If you don't believe in the prophets, you don't believe in the message, then you'll be equally destroyed, just like any of the nations that came before. And it's a warning to the Quraysh, because remember, the privilege has been given to the Quraysh. That is honor and this dignity of that, the symbols of the Hajj, the symbols of everything around the Kaaba still remain for them to respect these symbols of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَأَصْحَابُ مَدْيَنَ وَكُذِّبَ مُوسَى فَأَمْلَيْتُ لِلْكَافِرِينَ. And then Allah then mentions the companions of Madyan, being the people of Shu'aib, وَكُذِّبَ مُوسَى, and Musa alayhi salam, he was rejected or denied. فَأَمْلَيْتُ, يعني أَمْهَلْتُ, يعني لِلْكَافِرِينَ. I gave them a time span, I gave them leave. That's why you find that this is known as al-istidraj. Because many people ask this question, why do disbelievers so much of the earth? Why are they so powerful? Why are they so strong? Why this? Why that? That's because we don't understand the nusus of the Quran and Sunnah. This is known as al-istidraj, that the world has been given to them. These things, Allah is, in easy term, is letting the rein, the rope go loose. It's letting the rope go loose. If you have a riding beast and you just let it go loose, it's just going to start running. Somewhere along the line, when the rope stops, it's going to yank it, it's going to pull back and know that I'm still tied to the rope. So that وَلِلَّهِ مَثُلُ الْأَعْلَى, Allah's given rein, given loose, given go and do whatever. They think they're doing whatever they want to do. But when we take them, then we take them mublisin, we take them all of a sudden baghtatan. All of a sudden we snatch them, we take them, and then they become in a distressed state. So don't think that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't know. Inside Surah Ibrahim, وَلَا تَحْسَبَنَّ اللَّهَ غَافِلًا عَمَّا يَعْمَلُ الظَّالِمُونَ. Don't think that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is unaware of what the oppressive people, what they are doing. فَأَمْلَيْتُ لِلْكَافِرِينَ ثُمَّ أَخَذْتُمْ فَكَيْفَ كَانَ نَكِيرٌ. And here Allah mentions the same thing, that I leave them for a short time, ثُمَّ أَخَذْتُمْ, then I take them, I snatch them, فَكَيْفَ كَانَ نَكِيرٌ. How is it going to be my iqab? How is my punishment going to be upon these individuals? فَكَأَيٍّ مِّن قَرْيَةٍ أَهْلَكْنَاهَا وَهِيَ ظَالِمَةٌ. How many villages have we destroyed before they were ظالima? They were oppressive people. فَهِيَ خَاوِيَةٌ. It becomes empty, barren. Empty lands, like a ghost town. عَلَى عُرُوشِهَا. Nothing in its existence there. وَبِئْرٍ مُؤَطَّلَةٍ. A bi'r is a well which is matruka, a well which is left like a ghost town. Like when those cowboy movies, you walk inside and everything's just dead. That's what it is. You walk into the town, the village, everything's been destroyed. No living thing is there. The well is there, matruka, abandoned. Wa qasrin mashid. And his great big mutawwal, his great big buildings are left standing. That's why you can go fasiru fil ard. Fasiru fil ard, travel through the earth and see certain buildings are still standing there of the existence of the nations that existed before. How Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wiped out, whether it be the pyramids. Look at the expansion of the building, the pyramids in Petra in Jordan. Look at the relics that are left there, all showing signs that great big nations. وَتَنْحِتُونَ مِنَ الْجِبَالِ بُيُوتًا. You inscribe, you carve in mountains. In mountains you carve your dwellings. People today are boasting about the way, what they're building, what they're doing. Look at history, what these people, what they built. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala destroyed these individuals because of their rejection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then Allah mentions, أَفَلَمْ يَسِيرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ. So why don't they travel across the earth? فَتَكُونَ لَهُمْ قُلُوبٌ يَعْقِلُونَ بِهَا. Don't they have hearts to understand? The hearts to have the intellect to see. أَوْ آذَانٌ يَسْمَعُونَ بِهَا. Or don't they have ears to hear? فَإِنَّا لَا تَعْمَى الْأَبْصَارِ. It's not the eyes which have become blinded, وَلَكِنْ تَعْمَى الْقُلُوبُ الَّتِي فِي الصُّدُورِ. It's not the physical eyes which have become blinded. When Allah speaks about these people, they become summun, bukmun, umyun, fahum la yarji'un in the beginning of Al-Baqarah. Then fahum la ya'qilun. Why is it yarji'un and why is it ya'qilun? Ya Umair, why? You get muddled up in these ayat? You don't get muddled up. Yarji'un is the munafiqeen. Because the context speaks about whom? The hypocrites. They'll never come back to the path. The context the second time is summun bukmun umyun fahum la ya'qilun. It speaks about the disbelievers. So that's why the Quran is unique. That's why to understand the Quran, why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose or placed certain words or certain contexts inside there. It all gives you the dynamics of the Quran. To be able to live the Quran, to see the Quran. That's why someone was saying that, sometimes there's not enough spirituality And literally a person saying to me, maybe Sheikh, we should do some dhikr and to spiritually lift ourselves up. I said, Akhi, the problem is we don't understand the Quran. You don't need to chant certain things because it's fine that they go into this kashf and this state of spirituality. If you want to use those so-called words and terminologies, you'll go into that state when you listen to the Quran. You'll go into that state when you understand the language of the Quran. And you have the context of the Quran inside your mind. That's the way, that's what tazkiyah is. That's how it is to get close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You don't need to be chanting certain words. And even those words are blessed words. It's not about that, we're not rejecting the words. Remember, it's kayfiyah. Al-ibadah is tawqifiyah. Ibadah is restricted, it's codified. We can't worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala how we feel like worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How I feel. Now I might come in today feeling slightly tired for Maghrib and think, you know what, I'll just read 2 rak'at today. I'll read 1. Someone might come spiritually and say, no, I'll read 5. I'll read fawda. Isn't it? Because everybody's going to do whatever they want to do. Someone said, I feel like just saying Subhanallah wa bihamdi and just chanting that all day long. It's good words, isn't it? I'm not rejecting the words. Is it not a good word? How about just saying Allah, Allah, Allah? It's a good word, isn't it? Ismul Jalala. So we're not about, again, the words, it's the kayfiyah. It's the way that we do it. It's the way that we pronounce it, the fact that we go into a state. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala used name Allah, Ismul Jalal inside the Quran. Or He used the word huwa, ishar ilayhi. He never used that what we go into a state of panting the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's what one of the sheikhs that you find that he sent his 2 sons to go and meet one of these. And by the way, I'm not having a go at the Sufi sheikhs, etc. Do you understand? I have many friends amongst them, but just to help us to understand the context. So he sent his 2 sons to go and to meet the sheikh. So when the sheikh opened the door, and the first son said to him, Ahlan wa sahlan ya shaykhi. Then the second son said, Ahlan wa sahlan ya shaykhi. Sheikh thinks, mashallah, what good manners and etiquettes these young men have. So as they're walking, they say, look, come to our house, we want you to, our father's calling you, want to meet you, etc. And he wants to speak to you. So as they're walking, every time he looked at the right, the young son, that side, the boy goes, Ahlan wa sahlan ya shaykhi. He looked at the left, Ahlan wa sahlan ya shaykhi. So all through the journey, Ahlan wa sahlan ya shaykhi, Ahlan wa sahlan ya shaykhi. They get to the door, he knocks on the door. And the father comes and goes, Ahlan wa sahlan ya shaykhi. He goes, you as well. What is this? All through this journey. On the right, Ahlan wa sahlan ya shaykhi. On the left, on the right, on the left. He goes, all your life, what you've been doing? All your life, who. You're getting frustrated with me and my children. And this is what you do. This is your adab ma Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is your etiquettes and your respect towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Do you think Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to accept that? Did the Prophet ﷺ, did he ever make dhikr in that manner? Simple. We don't need to go into semantic discussions of fuqaha and ulama of tazkiyah, etc. One simple thing. If ever the Prophet ﷺ ever made dhikr like that, just one simple hadith, that's enough for us. Don't say the Prophet ﷺ said La ilaha illallah is afdalul dhikr. He said Allahu Akbar, say tasbeeh, say tahmeed, say tahleel. We're not denouncing that. That's not the discussion. Let's get that crystal clear. The discussion is kayfiyah, is the format. If that was his format, then we accept it. But if it's not been documented, remember, if you read the life of the Prophet ﷺ, the companions denoted every single thing. If he had a stain on his clothing, if his beard was like this, he moved his finger like this, he placed his hand like this, he moved like this, he talked like this, he ate like this, he grasped something like this, he combed his hair like this, he defecated like this, he urinated like this. It's all there, crystal clear. Now all of a sudden we can't find a hadith that says that the Prophet ﷺ said these words in this manner. Strange, isn't it? Strange, very strange. The books of hadith are there. They're all there. It's not something we're making up. So now all of a sudden now someone's now discovered that this is the way to make dhikr. And we find no source for it. The only source that we find that dhikr is something which is good, which we're not denouncing. It's the kayfiyah that we denounce, the way that you make dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is that we're rejecting, that this is not based upon how the Quran tells us to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and how the sunnah, the seerah of the Prophet who lived the embodiment of the Quran. So, وَإِنَّ is not la ta'mal absar, it's not the eyes that become blind, it's when the hearts become blind. When the hearts are blinded, then when the heart is lost from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when they become blind, that you can say whatever you want. It doesn't penetrate into the heart or the mind of the individual. وَيَسْتَعْجِلُونَكَ بِالْعَذَابِ وَلَنْ يُخْلِفَ اللَّهُ وَعْدَهُ وَإِنَّ يَوْمًا عِنْدَ رَبِّكَ كَأَلْفِ سَنَةٍ مِمَّا تَعُدُّونَ وَيَسْتَعْجِلُونَكَ بِالْعَذَابِ. They're hastening the adhab, the punishment. So the more that you disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're just hastening the punishment upon your own self. وَلَنْ يُخْلِفَ اللَّهُ وَعْدَهُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never goes against His promise. So Allah has laid out a promise that for the believers this is their reward, for the disbelieving individual this will be their punishment. وَإِنَّ يَوْمًا عِنْدَ رَبِّكَ كَأَلْفِ سَنَةٍ مِمَّا تَعُدُّونَ. Then Allah reminds about the last day. That the last day is like 1,000 years that you enumerate, that you count. Even though the last day is كَلَمْحِ الْبَصْرِ أَوْ هُوَ أَقْرَبُ. The last day is like the blinking of an eye, or even more swifter than that. وَكَأَيٍّ مِّن قَرْيَةٍ أَمْلَيْتُ لَهَا وَهِيَ ظَالِمَةٌ ثُمَّ أَخَذْتُهَا وَإِلَيَّ الْمَصِيرُ. Once again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes the same descriptive nature about any village, the village that existed before, how we take them and we destroy them, and to us will be their return. قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا النَّاسُ إِنَّمَا أَنَا لَكُمْ نَذِيرٌ مُبِينٌ. Verse number 49. قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا النَّاسُ. Say, O mankind. Remember the surah began with speaking about يَا أَيُّهَا النَّاسُ. Now say to all of mankind, إِنَّمَا أَنَا لَكُمْ نَذِيرٌ مُبِينٌ. Say to the mankind, indeed I am a messenger, a clear warning to all of you. إِنِّي رَسُولُ اللَّهِ إِلَيْكُمْ جَمِيعًا. That in Surah Al-Araf, the messenger ﷺ is a messenger to all of people, mankind. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. We don't send you as a messenger to all of the worlds. فَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ لَهُمْ مَغْفِرَةٌ وَرِزْقٌ كَرِيمٌ. Those individuals who believe, وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. And numerous times we mentioned that it's not just about belief. To just say that you believe is a deviant view. It's not just belief. فَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. You have to have belief and couple it with righteous actions. Throughout the Quran, maybe one or two rare occasions inside the Quran, Allah just speaks about belief. But other than that, the majority of the Quran speaks about those who believe and carry out righteous actions. So a sign of Iman is righteous actions with Iman. لَهُمْ مَغْفِرَةٌ وَرِزْقٌ كَرِيمٌ. For these individuals will be forgiveness, and there will be a noble provision will be given to these individuals. وَالَّذِينَ سَعُوا فِي آيَاتِنَا. Those who race in our signs, مُعَاجِزِينَ مُشَاقِينَ, rejecting them, أُولَئِكَ أَصْحَابُ الْجَحِيمِ. Those who hasten or turn away from the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, those individuals are going to be the companions of al-Jahim, and al-Jahim is one of the names of Jahannam. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَا مِن قَبْلِكَ مِن رَسُولٍ وَلَا نَبِيٍّ. We did not send before you a messenger or a prophet إِلَّا إِذَا تَمَنَّى أَلْقَى الشَّيْطَانُ فِي أُمْنِيَّتِهِ. Except for that when ayat tamanna bima'na tala are recited, alqa shaitan, the shaitan comes and he tries to derail people away from the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَيَنْسَخُ اللَّهُ مَا يُلْقِي الشَّيْطَانِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala yubtil, will wipe out that which shaitan tries to instill. ثُمَّ يُحْكِمُ اللَّهُ آيَاتِهِ وَاللَّهُ عَلِيمٌ حَكِيمٌ. And then you find a discussion begins to take place regarding what is the meaning of these ayat. Some ulama said that the general meaning of these ayat is وِسْوَاسٌ فِي نُفُوسِ النَّاسِ, is the whisperings that come inside the believing individuals, that shaitan comes to try to create a shukuk or shubuhat, shak and shubha and raib, create doubts inside the person. That's why الَّذِي يُوَسْوِسُ فِي صُدُورِ النَّاسِ. These whisperings that come, whether it be whisperings of ma'asi, of disobedience, or whisperings of what? Of doubt, of belief. That's why that's why you find that rightfully that reading about corrupt beliefs, if a person doesn't know their own belief, they won't be able to make that distinction. And likewise, getting too bogged down in certain like al-qada wal-qadar, in predestined decree and destination, that we find that excessive questioning about qadar, as Ibn Taymiyyah mentioned, that all the tawa'if, all the sects that deviated, in general, their main beginning point was about destiny. It was about questioning destiny, about the destiny that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed for people, to ask the excessive questioning about that, saying that doesn't make sense. Why is Allah giving that to that person and giving this to me? What will happen to the end of time? Or if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, why did Allah create the earth? If Allah knows what the end of everybody is going to be, why is there Jannah? Why is there Nar? Why is there punishment? Why is there good? Why is there evil? So he mentioned that the whole of all the corruption or deviant sects that begin to filter away, one of their key points is about excessive questioning about divine destiny. That's what a person shouldn't ask about it, shouldn't delve so much into it and have this excessive questioning. So that's the general discussion ulama mentioned. But then some ulama Tafsir, Imam Tabari, Ibn Kathir, begin to speak about what is known as al-gharaniq. This story, this qissa of gharaniq, this whole discussion, even though Ibn Taymiyyah rejects that, to do with the ayat inside. So to the end of Surah An-Najm, that we find that Shaitan came and he tried to add some extra words inside Surah An-Najm. If you go back to Tafsir Ibn Kathir, he discusses that inside there as well. But time doesn't permit us to, you need to go into that. لِيَجْعَلَ مَا يُلْقِي الشَّيْطَانُ فِتْنَةً لِلَّذِينَ فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ مَرَضٌ وَالْقَاسِيَةِ قُلُوبُهُمْ وَإِنَّ الظَّالِمِينَ لَفِي شِقَاقٍ بَعِيدٍ. And so this is a fitna. Whatever shaitan is trying to throw or try to instill is a fitna for those individuals who have a فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ مَرَضٌ, who have some form of doubt inside their hearts. As for the prophets, they have no doubt. For them, shaitan doesn't come, they are ma'sumin, they're infallible. Prophets are infallible, they're protected by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wallahu ya'simuka minan nas. Allah will protect you from people. All the prophets are protected. That's why, if you look at the Bible and how it describes the prophets, look at how it describes them. That's why it shows the corruption of the Bible today. And it describes, that's why the whole concept of why people do sin is, if the prophets are displayed as normal human beings, then what do people say? They are men and we are men. They sin, we sin. No. Prophets are sinless. And when we accidentally say the word linguistically that they sinned, what we mean is they erred. They made a minor misjudgment, a wrong choice at that moment in time. That's what so even we do say the word sin, no one should pounce at it and say, oh, you're saying prophets are sinning. No, that's what we mean if we did say the word sin. For example, Allah said inside the Quran, Abasa wa tawalla an ja'ul a'ma. Abasa wa tawalla. The Prophet, he frowned and he turned away. Imagine that. Just turning away, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is rebuking the Prophet, is warning him. The companion of Abdullah ibn Makhtoum, who's blind. The context of these ayat, the Prophet is speaking to the Quraysh, Mala'ul Qawm, he's speaking to the leaders of the Quraysh. He's thinking this is a prime opportunity to speak to the head of the Quraysh, and in comes this blind companion. He can't see that the Prophet ﷺ is speaking to Mala'ul Qawm, speaking to the elite people. He's coming to ask a question regarding this, regarding that. So the Prophet ﷺ sees him, he doesn't even say anything. Abasa wa tawalla. He just turned away. The blind person can't see that. It's not being rude in all essence. But who can see it? Allah. So Allah is saying, that's not acceptable from you, Ya Rasulullah. That's not befitting. Is that classified as a sin or even a mistake? But that's how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refines the prophets, to make them in that extreme level of caliber, of fine character and behavior. That's why we don't follow how these people begin to describe the Prophet. That's why for them, as you find that religion becomes a joke. They make a joke about the prophets, about everything, about symbols of Allah, about God, everything. So everything just becomes a joke for these individuals. في قلوب مرض, the people of sickness, والقاسية قلوبهم, those individuals harsh in their hearts. Here referring to the mushrikun. وإن الظالمين لفي شقاق بعيد. Indeed, the zalimin are in a khilaf and an adawa amongst regarding their beliefs. وَلِيَعْلَمَ الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْعِلْمَ أَنَّهُ الْحَقِّ. And as for the believing individuals, they know that this is the truth. أَنَّهُ الْحَقِّ. Referring back to what? To the Quran, مِنْ رَبِّكَ, from your Lord Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَيُؤْمِنُوا بِهِ فَتُخْبِتَ لَهُ قُلُوبُهُم. They believe in it, and فَتُخْبِت, and we mentioned previously about the mukhbitin, those who are submissive to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, itminan. They have peace and tranquility in their hearts. وَإِنَّ اللَّهَ لَهَادِ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا إِلَى صِرَاطٍ مُسْتَقِيمٍ. Indeed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who's going to guide these individuals to the right path. So here you find that for tukhbit, we find this what's known as a discussion. What is there's ilm, an-nadari, knowledge which is just reading, academic knowledge. That's one form of knowledge. That's what ulama speak as ilm al-nadhari. But it's ilm which is what? Alladhi yurith khashya. Ilm that generates khashya, that generates fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if you don't couple this technical reading and study with spiritual knowledge, it doesn't mean anything. Just walking about with all these any quotations and whatever it may be, that's not ilm. So Islam isn't just an ilm, just a science that you just learn things. It is an actual implementation. That's why Imam Ahmad rahmatullah, Imam Ahlul Sunnah, he praised a person once. And his companions, the scholars around him, the students don't ask him that, yeah, Imam Ahmad, that you're praising this individual. Why are you praising? What's so special? Why has he graduated some special science in hadith or something he's specialized in? وعنده رأس العلم. He has the head of knowledge. He has khashyatullah, his fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why Imam Ahmad is praising him. That the knowledge has an impact upon him, upon his life. And so if your knowledge doesn't lead you to closeness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, doesn't lead you to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then that knowledge, may Allah forbid, is going to be, as the Prophet ﷺ prayed for knowledge, al-ilm la yanfa' wa qalban la yakhsha'. Knowledge that doesn't benefit and a heart that doesn't become submissive. If it doesn't become, a person should pray that Allah will take that. وَعَيْنًا لَا تَدْمَعْ, and an eye that doesn't weep. Min khashyatillah, from the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not necessarily in public, at moments that a person has, that they reflect upon, the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Al-mulku yawma idhin lillahi yahkumu baynahum falladhina amanu wa amilu salihati fi jannati na'im. Then Allah reminds that the mulk yawma idhin lillah. That the mulk, the kingdomship, the sovereign power on that day belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yahkumu baynahum. And Allah will judge between all of us. فَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ, those who believe in the righteous actions, فِي جَنَّاتِ النَّعِيمِ, they will be in the garden rejoicing in the bliss of the gardens. وَالَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا وَكَذَّبُوا بِآيَاتِنَا فَأُولَٰئِكَ لَهُمْ عَذَابٌ مُهِينٌ. Remember this contrast again and again. Paradise and hell. Good reward, bliss. Evil punishment. Rejoicing, suffering. That's all a contrast inside the Quran. Moving between Jannah and Nar, paradise and hellfire. Giving us encouragement and warning us about what will happen if we disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَالَّذِينَ هَاجَرُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. Yani this is fadlul muhajirin, those who people made the migration in the way of Allah. ثُمَّ قُتِلُوا, and then they are slain, أو ماتوا, or they died. لَيَرْزُقَنَّهُمُ اللَّهُ رِزْقًا حَسَنًا وَإِنَّ اللَّهَ لَهُوَ خَيْرُ الرَّازِقِينَ. And these individuals will be given the best of rizq. That's why some ulama said, رِزْقًا حَسَنًا. So it doesn't mean just the provision that you find the shaheed will be given inside paradise. You look at the ayat inside Surah Al-Imran. Some will say that rizqan hasan, hasan huna bima'na jannah. Paradise will be given to these individuals. La yudkhilannahum mudkhalan. Here, sorry, mudkhalan. They'll be entered in the good entrance, which is Jannah. Yardawnahu wa inna Allah la alimun halim. Indeed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the forbearing, the all-knowing. Verse number 60, ذَلِكَ وَمَنْ عَاقَبَ بِمِثْلِ مَا عُوقِبَ بِهِ ثُمَّ بُغِيَ عَلَيْهِ لَيَنْصُرَنَّهُ اللَّهُ إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَعَفُوٌّ غَفُورٌ. Likewise, whoever وَمَنْ عَاقَبَ بِمِثْلِ مَا عُوقِبَ بِهِ, that if a person seeks retribution according to the harm that's been done to them, or they've been oppressed, then there's no harm in carrying that out. لَيَنْصُرَنَّهُ اللَّهُ إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَعَفُوٌّ غَفُورٌ. Indeed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mu'akkada is established from that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will aid and help the individual, and Allah is the one who pardons and the forgiving one. ذَلِكَ بِأَنَّ اللَّهَ يُولِجُ اللَّيْلَ فِي النَّهَارِ وَيُولِجُ النَّهَارَ فِي اللَّيْلِ وَأَنَّ اللَّهَ سَمِيعٌ بَصِيرٌ. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins to speak about Himself. Just like in Surah Ibrahim, Allah speaks about Himself inside there. He subjugated the heavens and the earth and all these things for us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then here begins to speak about Qudratullah. The power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because speaking about the previous nations, how He destroyed them, now speaking about the strength and the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. ذَلِكَ بِأَنَّ اللَّهُ الْحَقُّ وَأَنَّ مَا يَدْعُونَ مِن دُونِهِ هُوَ الْبَاطِلُ. Indeed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the truth, and wherever you call besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is false. وَأَنَّ اللَّهُ هُوَ الْعَلِيُّ الْكَبِيرُ. Indeed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the all-high, the mighty, Allah is powerful, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is Kamal al-Qudra, showing total any power which belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. أَلَمْ تَرَ أَنَّ اللَّهَ أَنزَلَ مِنَ السَّمَاءِ مَاءً. Now Allah is showing the display of His ability and His strength. أَلَمْ تَرَ, don't you see, don't you visualize? Even look at أَلَمْ تَرَ كَيْفَ فَعَلَ رَبُّكَ بِأَصْحَابِ الْفِيلِ. Don't you see what we done to the companions of the elephant? This is speaking to the Quraysh. So even if you take this literally, it applies, because some of them were still living who had seen what happened to the companions of of the elephant, speaking about Abraha, this ruler came from Yemen who came to destroy the Kaaba. So some of them are living, or it's saying that it's a depiction inside the Quran that don't you see what happened in the past? Their remnants and their signs are there. For us, we can just read about it. But Allah uses the descriptive nature, alam tara, don't you see? As if we are actually visualizing. Alam tara anna Allah anzala minas sama. This, we can visualize this. Don't you see how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala anzala minas sama'i ma'an? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings down from the skies the water. فَتُصْبِحُ الْأَرْضُ مُخْضَرًّا. You find that the earth begins to become greenery. Inna Allah latifun khabir. Indeed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is most subtle, the all-knowing. لَهُ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ وَإِنَّ اللَّهَ لَهُ الْغَنِيُّ الْحَمِيدُ. To Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala belongs whatever is in the heavens and the earth. And indeed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-Ghani, the all-rich, al-Hamid, the one who deserves all praise. Then again, alam tara anna Allah sakhara lakum ma fil ardi. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, after creating and showing about the heavens and earth, saying that now we've subjugated. We've given you to use this earth, ma fil ard, whatever is upon the earth, wal fulka tajri fil bahri bi amrihi, and granted you the safina, the boats to flow on the ocean. That's what even think about that. How does a boat float on the ocean? Why doesn't it sink? Why doesn't it drop down? Always a person can speak about the laws of science and this, that, and the other, but why doesn't it go down? This is why, that's what Allah mentioned, وَالْفُلْكَ تَجْرِي فِي الْبَحْرِ بِأَمْرِهِ. It floats by the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَيُمْسِكُ السَّمَاءَ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grasps the heavens and تَقَعَ عَلَى الْأَرْضِ, that the heavens don't drop down upon us, the sky doesn't fall upon us. عَلَى الْأَرْضِ إِلَّا بِإِذْنِهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ بِالنَّاسِ لَرَؤُوفُ رَحِيمٌ. Indeed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most merciful and kind towards the mankind. وَهُوَ الَّذِي أَحْيَاكُمْ. Again, now Allah speaks about qudratul ba'th, the qudra of resurrection, which remember at the beginning spoke about, it was one of the themes of the surah, that if you're in any doubt about the resurrection of the last day, then فَإِنَّا خَلَقْنَاكُم مِّن تُرَابٍ ثُمَّ مِّن نُطْفَةٍ. So Allah gives that description of nature, that if you're in doubt about the resurrection of the last day, see how you've been created yourself. So وَهُوَ الَّذِي أَحْيَاكُمْ ثُمَّ يُمِيتُكُم. Allah is the one that gives you life, then He calls you to die. ثُمَّ يُحْيِيكُم. Then give you life again. إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَكَفُورٌ. But man is what? Jahood. Man rejects that. Rejects the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Bring me back to life. لِكُلِّ أُمَّةٍ جَعَلْنَا مَنْسَكًا. For every nation we made a form of ibadah, hum nasikuhu, they begin to follow that. فَلَا يُنَازِعُنَّكَ فِي الْأَمْرِ. And وَادْعُ إِلَى رَبِّكَ إِنَّكَ لَعَلَى هُدًى مُسْتَقِيمٍ. Call to the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you are upon the guided path. وَإِنْ جَادَلُوكَ فَقُلِ اللَّهُ أَعْلَمُ بِمَا تَعْمَلُونَ. Some ulama said, in other words, don't waste your time. وَإِنْ جَادَلُوكَ. After all these signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah's created this, done this, subjugated this, do that, etc. And people still asking, somebody comes and says, this so-called atheist, I don't believe in God, prove to me God exists. You've spoken to him about the evidences, whether it be al-adilla al-aqliya, whether it be intellectual proofs, whether it be existing proofs all around you, evidence from the Quran. وَإِنْ جَادَلُوكَ فَقُلِ اللَّهُ أَعْلَمُ بِمَا تَعْمَلُونَ. Just leave these people alone. That's it, finished. Don't carry on wasting your time. That you've presented everything, and you've done whatever you can do to tell these people. Allah يحكم بينكم يوم القيامة. Allah will judge with these people at their judgment. فيما كنتم فيه تختلفون. In whatever these people used to differ upon. ألم تعلم أن الله يعلم ما في السماء والأرض إن ذلك في كتاب إن ذلك على الله يسير. Don't you know? Don't you have knowledge? أن الله يعلم ما في السماء. Allah knows whatever is in the heaven and the earth. إن ذلك في كتاب. Indeed, that is in a record. اللوح المحفوظ, the guarded tablet with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إن ذلك على الله يسير. Whenever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about the hereafter, bringing people back, the record, everything, وَذَلِكَ عَلَى اللَّهِ يَسِير. Allah always uses this something simple, something easy for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to do this. It's something easy for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Al-amr بين الكاف والنون كن فيكون. For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just say kun fayakun, be, and it will come into any existence or stop existence. وَيَعْبُدُونَ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ مَا لَمْ يُنَزِّلْ بِهِ سُلْطَانًا. They begin to worship besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that which they have no proof at all. وَمَا لَيْسَ لَهُمْ بِهِ عِلْمٌ. They have no real knowledge about it. وَمَا لِلظَّالِمِينَ مِن نَصِيرٍ. Thus we find that the principles of the Quran, الظَّالِمُونَ لَيْسَ لَهُمْ نَصِيرٍ. Oppressive people never have nobody to help them, لا في الدنيا, in the end, and ولا في الآخرة. So this is, there's no point, debating these people, because they're worshipping besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that which they have no proof of, no evidence. So don't waste your time with these individuals. وَإِذَا تُتْلَى عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتُنَا بَيِّنَاتٍ تَعْرِفُ فِي وُجُوهِ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا الْمُنكَرَ. So when these clear signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala recited upon these individuals, you see upon their face. You see al-hiqd, zahir. You see this repulsive look or this feeling, hatred and anger on their faces. يَكَادُونَ يَسْطُونَ بِالَّذِينَ يَتْلُونَ عَلِيهِمْ آيَاتِنَا. As they want to pounce and overcome these people reciting the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. قُلْ أَفَأُنَبِّئُكُمْ بِشَرٍّ مِّن ذَلِكُمُ النَّارِ وَعَدَ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا وَبِئْسَ الْمَصِيرِ. Shall I not tell you about those individuals who the evil punishment will be for those individuals? For them will be, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised for these individuals the hellfire. Then we come to verse number 73, which is one, as we mentioned, there's numerous parables mentioned inside Surah Al-Hajj. But this is the most exquisite parable which is mentioned inside the surah and actually inside the Quran. يَا أَيُّهَا النَّاسُ ضُرِبَ مَثَلٌ فَاسْتَمِعُوا لَهُ. So here look at the khitab, isn't for believers, just as the surah begins with, it's for all of mankind. ضُرِبَ مَثَلٌ. A parable has been thrown down, a paradigm has been thrown down. فَاسْتَمِعُوا لَهُ. Pay attention. Al-istima'u, to hear, pay attention, it doesn't mean just to listen to it. Al-istima' ashaddu min as-sam'i, is more attentive than just listening, that you pay close attention and focus upon this. فَاسْتَمِعُوا لَهُ إِنَّ الَّذِينَ تَدْعُونَ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ. Those you call on besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, لَن يَخْلُقُوا ذُبَابًا. They're not going to be able to create a fly. وَلَوْ اجْتَمَعُوا لَهُ. Even they get together. If they get together, they won't be able to do it. وَإِن يَسْلُبْهُمُ الذُّبَابُ شَيْئًا. And if the dhubab, يَنْزِعُ مِنْهُ شَيْء, if the fly takes away something from them, لَا يَسْتَنْقِذُوهُ مِنْهُ. They're not able to take it back from the fly. ضَعُفَ الطَّالِبُ وَالْمَطْلُوبُ. That which is being the seeker and that which is being sought are all weak. So if we take the larger meaning, the idols. So the idols that you're praying to, they're weak. They're weak themselves, and that which you're seeking from them is weak as well. There's nothing, they cannot benefit you anyway. So just as we mentioned the theme of dropping from the heavens, that shirk and worshipping besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's nothing that they can do for you. Now the idols and the statues, not to sound derogatory and rude, but people who worship idols, whatever their orientation may be, of standing there and bowing down in front of the idols and thinking that these tanfa'uhum, that they benefit them in any way. Just you've made this with your own hands. You've taken clay or whatever it may be, and you've made this image and say this is supposed to be your ilah, your deity. That's why Umar al-Khattab, they said that they used to laugh at times about the jahiliyyah. Some ulama they say that the authenticity may not be there, but the meaning is there. You can't deny the meaning that this is something that they used to do in jahiliyyah. That when they used to go on a journey and they couldn't find the idol, what did they used to do? They used to put the dates together and shape it like a rock and say that's our idol. And then when they felt hungry, what did they do? They used to eat from the same dates. So Umar al-Khattab, they said we used to laugh at our jahiliyyah practices. This is how silly, how foolish we were. That this is our worship. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows His signs. And that's why even with the Quraysh, you find that some of the young boys, they went and they took hubal, they took the idols, they threw it in a pit. The Quraysh, when they took it out of the pit, cleaned it up and said, oh, who done this to you, whatever it may be, we're so sorry. The same next night, they done it again, they come again, they cleaned it up. Third night, they put swords and everything around and said, look, you better defend yourself. And done it again. And that's why you find that Ibrahim alayhi salam, when he used to, Alam tara ila alladhi hajja Ibrahim fi rabbi an atahu Allah al-mulk. When they begin to debate, you look at aqlan, Muslim is smart. You don't need to get emotional and physical with people. You use the rationale, the mind. That when they debated with Ibrahim alayhi salam, قال إبراهيم ربي الذي يحيي ويميت. Ibrahim said, my Lord is one who gives life and death. Namrud said, قال أنا أحيي وأميت. Namrud said that I'm the one that gives life and death. Did Ibrahim say that, oh, just be quiet, what are you talking about life and death? What did he do? He brought one, ulama Tafsir Ibn Kathir mentions he brought two people out of prison. One of them he let them go, the other one he executed them. He said this is life and death. Everybody knows this isn't life and death. قال إبراهيم فإن الله يأتي بالشمس من المشرق فأتي بها من المغرب. So you claim to be God now. Okay, let's use your logic now. You're God. فإن الله يأتي بالشمس من المشرق. Allah brings the sun from the east. You're a God. Bring it from where? From the west. Change the alternation. You just showed us life and death now. Change the alternation of the sun. فَبُهِتَ الَّذِي كَفَرْ وَاللَّهُ لَا يَهْدِي الْقَوْمَ الظَّالِمِينَ. فَبُهِتَ just means, in easy terms, dumbfounded, gobsmacked, could not say anything. Jaw dropped. He can't respond. That's how a Muslim should be, a smart, intellectual individual. Intellectual means that you use the Quran. That's why a lot of ulama say you don't need to read falsafa, philosophy to deal with these people. Read and understand the Quran. مَا قَدَرُ اللَّهِ حَقَّ قَدْرِهِ. They haven't given the due estimate that belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَقَوِيٌّ عَزِيزٌ. And as we heard the recitation, Allah يَشْتَفِي مِنَ الْمَلَائِكَةِ رُسُلًا وَمِنَ النَّاسِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ سَمِيعٌ بَصِيرٌ. Indeed, Allah يَشْتَفِي مِنَ الْمَلَائِكَةِ. Allah selects and chooses from the angels and from the messengers, and وَمِنَ النَّاسِ, and from mankind. إِنَّ اللَّهَ سَمِيعٌ بَصِيرٌ. Indeed, Allah is the all-hearing, the all-seeing. يَعْلَمُ مَا بَيْنَ أَيْدِيهِمْ وَمَا خَلْفَهُم. He knows that which is in front of them, which is behind them. وَإِلَى اللَّهِ تُرْجَعُ الْأُمُورِ. And all affairs return back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then Allah then concludes, as we mentioned, that some of the ulama don't agree that this is a place of sajda. But we mentioned that a large portion go to the view that there's two sajdas based upon certain narrations of Abdullah ibn Abbas, two sajdas that occur inside Surah al-Hajj. So this moment in time, the end of the surah you find the sajda is here. يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا ارْكَعُوا وَاسْجُدُوا وَاعْبُدُوا رَبَّكُمْ وَافْعَلُوا الْخَيْرَ لَعَلَّكُمْ تُفْلِحُونَ. So this is the whole theme of Allah. What is the theme of Allah? Submission. Okay, the whole theme is submit to Allah. So here Allah concludes, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا ارْكَعُوا. All you who believe, bow down, go into ruku, wasjudu, prostrate, wa'budu rabbakum, worship your Lord, waf'alul khayra, do good actions, all other good actions, la'allakum tuflihun, that you may become successful individuals. Wajahidu fil layl haqqa jihadi, and strive in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Some ulama describe it with ikhlas, with sincerity, that you're worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Huwa ijtabakum, huwa ikhtarakum. Allah has selected you. Look at this great favor upon us. وَمَا جَعَلَ عَلَيْكُمْ فِي الدِّينِ مِنْ حَرَجٍ. Allah has not made anything difficult of this deen. Al-Islam is Deenul Hanafiya as-Samha. Islam is simple, easy, complacent, if we can say that in one word. It's easy. Allah doesn't want any hardship. مَا يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ عَلَيْكُمْ مِنْ حَرَجٍ. Allah doesn't want any hardship upon us. We make the hardship ourselves upon ourselves. Allah makes things easy. That's why Hajj, when a person came and asked the Prophet ﷺ, is it every single year? 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 The Prophet ﷺ said that if I said yes, what would happen? It become what? Obligatory. So Hajj is allowed once in a year. Why should we come now and ask the question, oh no, I think I need to go back again. I need to go again. I need to go again. Once in a year, once in a lifetime, that's it. So Allah has allowed certain things, that which Allah has allowed, that's it, accept it. Don't be nitpicky about it to make things difficult upon your own self. Millata abikum Ibrahim. All of this is the path of Ibrahim alayhi salam. The millah, the way of Ibrahim, which has been once again the main theme of the surah in these days, of the path of Ibrahim. Huwa sabmakumul muslimin. Allah has called us Muslims. That's it, simple. This distinction that we've made ourselves, that this type of Muslim, this evidence from the Quran is not allowed. That's why even ulama who speak about when people have alqab and titles of the type of Muslims that they are, those same ulama said that if it leads to misunderstanding and friction amongst Muslims, then these titles are not allowed. They're not allowed to give a more definite descriptive nature of what type of Muslim you are, meaning what type of group or Muslim identity that you may follow. It's not allowed if it leads towards fitna. Because Allah said, Huwa sammakumul muslimin. Allah has made us to be Muslims, min qablu wa fi hada. Prior to this, everybody was a Muslim. And in this book, in this revelation as well, وَفِي هَذَا لِيَكُونَ الرَّسُولُ شَهِيدًا عَلَيْكُمْ, that the messenger may become a witness over you, وَتَكُونُ شُهَدَاءَ عَلَى النَّاسِ, and you become witnesses upon people. That's why in the hadith, أَنْتُمْ شُهَدَاءُ اللَّهِ عَلَى الْأَرْضِ, you are the witnesses of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon this earth. You are witnesses for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon the face of this earth. And then فَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتُوا الزَّكَاةَ, establish the prayer and give the zakah. وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِاللَّهِ هُوَ مَوْلَاكُمْ, hold fast to the rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, huwa mawlakum, He is your protector. فَنِعْمَ الْمَوْلَى, and He is the best of protectors. وَنِعْمَ النَّصِيرُ, and the best of those who aid and give help. That is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's as we mentioned, that the surah begins by speaking about the last day and what happened on the last day. Surah ends by speaking about the gathering of the last day, or the gathering of human beings, how we should be on the face of this earth in preparation for the last day. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us all the tawfiq and ability to live true to this surah of Surah al-Hajj, inshallah. And like I said, to go back and in our own time to go read this surah. Once again, as we mentioned, we began with that there's mawasim, seasons and times, that at certain times and certain moments, that certain actions are more relevant and more important. So during the days of Hajj, we should be reading such surahs or such ayat to know what Hajj is all about and how we can increase in doing goodness. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept it from all of us, inshallah. Barakallahu feekum.